Morning all. I'd like to welcome everybody along to the Planning Applications Committee, 22nd October 2014. And could I just ask that all mobile phones are either switched off, and I'd just like to confirm that I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. I'd ask the clerk to confirm the Sederunt.
Thank you, Chair. We have 16 members present today, so we are quorate, and we have apologies from Councillor Gilroy and Councillor McCutcheon. Thank you.
Have we got any declarations of interest?
Item 10, my wife's the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. I've got an interest in item number 4 due to a business relationship with one of the representatives, so I ought to remove myself for that item.
Fine. Alistair?
Item 10, Chair. I know the applicant, but my interest is such that I feel it's not necessary for me to absent myself from that item.
Thanks. Move on to item 3, minutes of the meeting 24th of September 2014. Item 5, could a chairman ask the clerk to outline the procedures to be followed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and then applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when determining on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Can I just make a point in item 7? Mr Wilson, one of the representatives, telephoned and called into Militia House reception advising that he was on holiday and he didn't receive the relevant information with regards to registering to speak until after the cut-off period. As Chairman, at my discretion, I will allow Mr Wilson 3 minutes to speak on this item. Move on to item 4, which is Moat Brae, 101 George Street, Dumfries. Application 14P3-3-0390 and 14-P-3 0416. On this item, Bilton Beldoyle and Bill Harrow requested that Father Crosby to speak on their behalf. However, as the requests were sent out after Monday, 20th October 10:30 cut-off, which is set out in our guidance notes and covering letter, the decision on whether Father Crosby can speak on their behalf is now at my discretion. I'll allow Father Crosby to speak on their behalf, and you'll now have 15 minutes, but I trust you will not require this amount of time. Thank you. We'll go to the case officer. Speaking is Lindsay on her behalf. On behalf of the application.
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to look at the location plan in your committee papers, I'll take you through the photographs. This first slide is a location plan identifying the application site. Moat Brae is located on the northern side of George Street at its junction with Irving Street between Dumfries Academy, Gallamair House and the River Nith. This first photograph is taken on the approach to Moat Brae from the south along Irving Street. Moat Brae is the sandstone building in the centre of the photograph, and 99 George Street with Gallamair House behind is the cream-coloured building to the left of Moat Brae, with the gap between the two buildings directly at the end of Irving Street. Moving north to where Irving Street meets George Street, this photograph is the front of Moat Brae. Panning round to the right, this photograph shows a small area of private road to the front of Moat Brae, where it is proposed to form 2 disabled parking bays together with some cycle parking. It also shows the access to and the buildings at Dumfries Academy. The 2 trees that can be seen in the centre of the photograph are to be retained as part of the proposal. Panning round to the left, this photo shows the relationship between Moat Brae and 99 George Street and Gallamair House. The gap between the 2 buildings is where the west extension and the lift and stair block would be located. Moving along George Street, this photograph looks back towards Moat Brae. You've got 99 George Street in the middle ground. Moving into the rear garden of Moat Brae, this photograph looks back in a southerly direction across the back of the existing building. The 2 new extensions would be located to either side elevation to ensure that the unaltered principal and rear elevations remain as such. Now panning to the left, you can see the site for the proposed east extension. The 3 trees that you can see in the photograph would require to be removed to accommodate this extension. Now panning round to the right, this photo shows the relationship between Moat Brae and Gallamair House, together with the proposed location of the west extension. The west extension, which is a single storey, would extend from George Street to a point approximately in line with the right-hand edge of the photograph. Moving to the western boundary, this photo looks back towards George Street. Both the single-storey west extension and the lift and stair block would be located in this gap between the 2 buildings. Moving to the northeast boundary, this is a view across the extent of the existing gardens. It shows the relatively level area directly to the rear of Moat Brae and the sloping nature of the rest of the garden as it extends down to the river. The trees in this area are generally of high amenity value and would be retained. Panning right, this shows again the existing gardens, the River Nith, and then views to the land beyond. Turning to look in a northeasterly direction, this view is towards the existing woodland area to the rear of Dumfries Academy, which is proposed to incorporate within the gardens. It would form part of the proposed play and recreational area and accommodate the maintenance yard. This woodland area generally consists of low-value scrub and some naturally regenerated trees. The proposed felling of some of the existing trees in this area is part of a long overdue management of what has been neglected. This aerial view, taken looking in a southerly direction, shows the nature of the 2 garden areas. You can see the woodland area towards the left-hand side of the photograph and the existing garden ground in sort of the middle of the photograph. It also shows the relationship between existing development and the existing landscape features. Moving inside the building, the next set of photographs show the current condition of the building and indicate where some of the alterations would be required to bring about the change of use. These relate to the listed building consent application only. This photograph is one of the interpretation rooms at the front of the building on the ground floor, and the dotted line towards the right-hand side indicates where the new doorway would be formed in the external wall to provide access to the proposed east extension. Moving on through to one of the interpretation rooms at the rear of the building, again the dotted line shows where a new doorway would be formed between the two interpretation rooms in the rear half of the building. This is the other rear interpretation room, with the dotted line showing where a new doorway would be formed in the external wall to provide access to the west extension. You can probably just make out that there was previously a doorway there. This final photograph from the ground floor shows another of the later partition walls, which is proposed to remove. Moving up to the first floor, this photograph shows the internal walls in the rear half of the building, which it's intended to remove to create one large interpretation, story making and performance and activity space. Moving around, again at first floor, the dotted lines again show the internal partitions to be removed, and the area behind is where it's proposed to reinstate a staircase to the attic floor. Moving up to the attic, this shows the proposed Darlings room at the rear of the building. Again, the dotted line showing where a doorway would be formed in the external wall to provide access to both lift and stair extension. This is one of the other rear attic rooms. Generally shows the condition at the moment. And this is photograph of the basement, again showing the general condition of the building. This is the proposed site plan, which shows Moat Brae together with the two extensions proposed and the extent of the gardens. This slide shows proposed south elevation to George Street, the single-storey west extension and the lift and stair block, which will be located in the gap between Moat Brae and Barry House, seen in the middle of the photograph. The east extension can be seen to the right-hand side of the slide, just above the Dumfries Academy boundary wall. This is the proposed rear elevation, again showing the proposed extensions, the relationship to the existing building and Barry House. This is the west extension and would be the view as seen from Barry House. This is a cross-section through the west extension and clearly shows the curved form of the roof and the glazed elevations to the gardens. This is the proposed east elevation. This elevation would only really be seen from within the gardens of Moat Brae itself. And again, a cross-section through the east elevation showing its relationship to the existing Moat Brae building. This is simply a proposed basement plan. There's only a basement proposed to the west extension, then the existing basement with some alterations to the existing building. The proposed ground floor plan showing the two new extensions. The first floor plan. The attic floor. And finally the roof plan. This plan shows the floor plans for the existing building and shows the extent of the downtakings, which largely includes some later partitions, the formations of some new doorways into the new extensions, and the erection of some new internal walls. This is the proposed garden layout, with a formal garden directly adjacent to the existing building and a more informal play and recreational area set in the wider garden. And these final 4 slides shows a series of visualisations or artist impressions of the proposed development. This will be the view from George Street. This is a section through the proposed west elevation. This is a view from within the gardens. You can see both of the proposed extensions. And finally, an aerial view which shows the relationship of the extensions to both Moat Brae and Barry House.
We'll open this up to questions for the officer. Jane?
Could you tell me, please, about the attic staircase? It's a part of the representations made in here, and it's not entirely clear whether there is or isn't an attic staircase. What's the current situation?
This photograph shows roughly where the staircase would be located. There was a staircase there previously, but it did collapse during sort of some of the earlier restoration works. It is to propose to reinstate a staircase in this location. We don't have the precise details of such at present, but that is one of the proposed conditions.
Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Please indulge my architectural ignorance and explain to me what a sedum roof is.
A sedum roof is a natural growing plant species, so it's a sort of a it's a low-level plant species.
Got any more questions for the officer? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. The business plan envisages 45,000 visitors annually, but yet comparatively little car parking is being provided. How is that justified?
Paragraphs 4.49 through to 4.50 in the report relate to access and parking provision. Given the town centre location, which is fairly accessible, the location of local transport, public transport hubs, and also the existing provision, both on-street and off-street parking, there is no requirement to, or certainly the roads officer has no objection to the level of parking proposed.
Jim, come back.
Anyone who has tried to park in that part of Dumfries will be aware that car parking is very much at a premium. It is extremely difficult at the moment to find car parking spaces. And consequently, I am surprised by the lack of parking provision.
Lindsay, anything about that?
Well, I think the only point to make on that is that obviously physically there is no capacity to be able to get on-site parking, or the only way to do it would be to have a detrimental effect on the garden, which is obviously part of the interest of it. We just have to take on board the comments that the roads officers have made, that with town centre locations and developments, you often cannot have that, and there again, in this day and age, we should be encouraging sustainable transport methods anyway, and not necessarily providing massive car parks.
Just moving on to what Jim said there about that, as I say, this has got to be pretty much educational. As I can imagine school kids coming in buses, I notice what's the proviso for buses going there, dropping off, etc., because it may block the road.
Again, there is provision for setting down and picking up from coaches. There is existing coach parking facilities in the locality where buses can be parked while visitors are at the centre. Again, the council roads officer has no concerns in this respect.
Fine, Lindsay. No more questions? Oh, Jane.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask, on page 22, paragraph 4.27, this is really a procedural issue. I'm quite curious to see that both the Council and Historic Scotland support the principle of extending the original building. Where does that come through, and how does that sit with planning? I'm sort of interested in that.
I suppose, I mean, if what you're getting at is the term the council, then that should probably say officers, just to make that clear. It is maybe sloppy wording on our part, but it's council officers and Historic Scotland officers, it should read.
No more questions for the officer? We'll now move on to the objectors. First up to speak is Father Crosby. He'll be speaking on behalf of himself, Mr Booth, Dr Alex Smith, Bell Doyle and Mr Harrow. As I said at the start, he's got 15 minutes, but I trust he'll not need as long as that.
As the Vice Chair of the Lothian Community Council as statutory consultee, in addition to the others, I'm very pleased at the allocated time of 15 minutes given by the Chair. I think the first thing I'd like to draw attention to the Chair at this meeting is the legal challenge to the listed building consent application that has been made. There's been no mention to that extent at this meeting, and it needs to be raised. The listed building consent application was filled out on the 6th of August, wrongly, stroke falsely, stroke irregularly. We don't know the answer to that one because we didn't write it. But the form was filled out wrongly. A new form was then submitted on the 22nd of September, which was after the public consultation period had elapsed, and therefore the challenge is that the public were misled, and therefore their rights diminished in consultation. Therefore, the listed building consent application should not be being heard by this committee because a formal complaint has been made about that, and the formal complaint procedure of DGC and the Public Services Ombudsman has not yet run its course. So I don't see how this committee can decide something of which a formal complaint has been made, but there we are. I'm sure someone might have an answer for me at the end. Assuming that we're continuing to hear the listed building consent application, are we?
Yes, the complaint members is a procedural matter and will not affect the application before us today.
With the greatest respect, I do not agree with that. The complaint impacts upon the rights of the public to comment in an informed way on this application. I'm aware that this meeting's been recorded and what I'm saying will be used. There's no way that the public should be misinformed and then an application accepted just on the basis of one further piece of paper. That aside, obviously, if we're going to go ahead and hear it, I have to speak to both applications. Is it the case that we're going ahead? Yes.
Yes. Okay,
thank you, Councillor Martin. The other point I'd like to raise before I go into any detail, the officer has misled the members here. That's a wonderful site plan of...
Mr Crosby, that is your opinion.
No, I'm going to repeat what was said, Councillor Martin. The officer stated that the extensions would only be seen from the garden of Moat Brae House. Those of us who know Dumfries know full well that all of those extensions will be completely visible from all of the academy playing fields and from the whole of Sandside. They'll not just be visible from the gardens of Moat Brae House, they'll be visible from the whole of Sandside and from the academy playing fields. So it's wrong to say that, it's completely wrong, beyond question, that they're just visible from the gardens of Moat Brae House. They're visible from the whole of the other side of the river. The Community Council and all the others, I'm going to try and sum it up because I don't want to bore you because everybody's written at length and the elected members have had the chance to read it. I'm not opposed in any sense to the Moat Brae project. Nearly everyone I know supported the Moat Brae project and it's an inception to save Moat Brae House. I don't know anyone that objected to that. What the objection is from everyone that I represent, and they all say the same thing, is the design of this abortion which is being pinned onto a Category B listed house in a conservation area. It is totally inappropriate. The gable that you see to the academy side of that house was designed as the stop end of a terrace. And on the end to the stop end of a terrace, we're sticking something which could have fallen off any Tesco supermarket. On the other side of the house, I think the best comparison, I don't know if the officer could assist by this, but there's a lovely photograph of the academy chimney, which appears in the presentation. And I think that is probably quite a good example of what we're going to be faced with, stuck onto the other side of the house. There you are, there, back one. There you are. We're going to have a great big chunky thing glued onto the side of the house, which is a lift shaft. This is astonishing. The interior of this house has been completely gutted. There isn't anything left of the original interior. There is absolutely no good or practical reason why the lift shaft shouldn't be contained within the existing structure. I fully understand the applicant's desire to have modern services in a new build attached to the building on the vacant plot between John Barry House and Moat Brae House. It makes perfect sense. What doesn't make sense is this extrusion which is being proposed, which will go even higher. I don't know if we could flick to another picture. I think the one with Moat Brae scrawled up, the chimney-like addition, was the good one, which will go even higher than the existing building. I mean, no right-thinking person is objecting to the creation of modern, suitable space for this project. Not that. This town has suffered for the last 40 years with the addition of hideous nonsense and junk. And there is no reason to continue it, members. This is meant to be a conservation area of the highest standard. I mean, the Langholm Community Council are absolutely thrilled at the speed with which the planning department have processed this planning application. It's really impressive, and it's obviously setting a new benchmark for major planning applications. An application lodged on the 6th of August has appeared before this committee on the 22nd of October. I leave the people of Dumfries to conclude, is it perhaps because it's £4.5 million worth? There is nothing that can be easily put into words to describe the difficulties that those who actually live in Dumfries have with this application. There is not one single letter of support for this. And I would urge members, rather than just, in the past, this committee, with the greatest respect, has relied on officers to tweak applications conditionally afterwards. And this has failed, I have to say. There's no example of it succeeding. The only way to address this application is to say to the applicant, go away, this design is inappropriate in a conservation area. It's simply not something which the residents of Dumfries want. Now, I dare say there are those who say it's not to do with the residents of Dumfries. We're going to have, I must confess, 45,000. I'm grateful to the elected member that raised that figure because I had missed it. 45,000 people coming to Dumfries to visit Moat Brae House. Well, there we are. The parking problems have already been raised. There is a campaign, by the way, on the part of the residents through the Community Council to allocate residents-only spaces in this area of town because the congestion is so difficult for those who actually live in the town centre. I think this just needs to be rejected outright. There's nothing wrong with the principle of extending Moat Brae to accommodate modern facilities and to create this project. What is wrong with this application is it's a design which is detrimental to the setting of the conservation area. It will be seen from all over the other side of the river. It's not something which is going to be hidden. It will destroy the symmetry of the Academy side gable of the house, and it will destroy the symmetry, such as is left, of the John Barry side of the house. It's wholly, totally, and utterly inappropriate. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said.
Thanks, Father Crosby. Any members got any questions for Father Crosby?
Father Crosby, you said that you agree with the idea of extending it, but not the current design, yet you also say there's a problem of getting 45,000 people in there. How do you equate agreeing with the proposal and saying there's a problem with parking?
It's terribly simple, Councillor Hislop. I don't believe there'll ever be 45,000 people coming to this. And I think that we already provide children's literature services through our wonderful Ewart Library. And other people are going to speak to that, so I'm not going to bore the elected members with that. But I do not believe for 1 minute that this one project will attract more visitors than any other project in the whole of Dumfriesshire, because that's what's being claimed. So I have no difficulty in squaring those two, Councillor Hislop, because frankly I don't believe 45,000 visitors will come.
Councillor Groom.
I'd just like to point out to Father Crosby that right across the river from that is not Sandside, it is Nithside. Sandside is next to the Glasgow Road.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Father Crosby. Chairman, through you, I would just like to be absolutely clear because I like procedural issues. Father Crosby is speaking, I believe, now on behalf of the Lawburn Community Council. Is that clear? Is that correct, Chairman? Is that
Unfortunately, Councillor Maitland, I think I'm speaking on behalf of about 5 people.
Father Crosby is speaking on behalf of himself, Mr. Booth, Dr. Alex Smith, Bell Doyle, and Mr. Harrow. Not Lorburn. Mr. Harrow, not Lorburn Community Council.
Not Lawburn Community Council.
Oh,
Right.
yes, I am, I'm afraid. It's just it's just the fact the paperwork's got muddled. I am.
You're not down Lorburn Council, Community Council. is
I
not
can't
down
be
to
held
speak.
responsible for the processes beyond my control.
Chairman, may I then just ask a question, which is, as an official or a member of the Community Council and an office bearer, then could I possibly just ask about the level of consultation that has gone on with what has Lawburn Community Council actively done to gather opinion, please?
I'm happy to answer.
David. Father Crosby.
Oh, me, right, okay. The Community Council invited representatives Cathy Agnew and Barbara Kelly to a full meeting of the Community Council, which was advertised as a public meeting. And there was a very positive discussion because, as I've said several times, and I hope I've made it clear, the Community Council is not opposed to the principle of the provision of facilities at Moat Brae to advance the project. That Community Council, the minutes of that Community Council are available if anybody wants them. The Community Council had representations from the public, from Cathy Agnew, from Barbara Kelly, but it was made absolutely clear to the representatives of the Peter Pan Moat Brae Trust, and this was over a year ago, that the Community Council would not support an extension which was not sympathetic to the conservation area of Dumfries.
So you held a meeting, a community council meeting. Was it a meeting that was expressly organised to get people's opinion, or was it a meeting that is naturally open to the public as a community council? I just am not completely clear as to what level of active exploration of Dumfries people has gone on.
It was a meeting specifically organised for the Peter Pan Moat Brae Trust representatives, if that answers your question. The Community Council, as you know, are volunteers, and holding a public meeting is in itself a major commitment of time. In relation to the opinions of those who are resident within the Royal Borough of Dumfries, there are no letters of support for this application that have been lodged. There are over 30 letters of objection from those who live within Dumfries.
Just to make it clear, Father Crosby, was the meeting of the Lorburn Community Council, was it expressly
Yes.
for the Moat Brae Trust? There was no other business at that meeting? Councillor Dempster?
Again, it's just a technical point, and I'm sure it'll make no difference either to Father Crosby nor members, but you described this as a major application. In fact, it's a local application. That's why you've been restricted to 3 minutes, and there is a significant difference as far as officers are concerned.
I think, Councillor Dempster, I'm very happy with the time that the Chair allocated. I don't have a problem with their time.
Councillor Dryborough?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to ask Father Crosby, I mean, you said you had this meeting over a year ago with the Moat Brae. Yet at the start of your representation, you said that nobody had the opportunity because of the time issues with regards to planning application. Now, I would imagine that having discussed this at one specific community council, that you would have been watching this very clearly, and opportunities then would have come forward. So I'm just wondering why, at this late stage, that you're actually talking to members and saying that somehow council officers have misled the members.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to reply to those comments. The misleading comment in relation to, although I misdescribed the area, and I'm grateful to Councillor Groom for correcting me, the officer here misled the meeting by saying that the buildings would not be seen from anywhere else. It's not true. So that's just a statement of fact. The fact is that the Community Council lodged its objection as a statutory consultee to this planning application within the first week of the application appearing on the planning applications list. The period that I'm referring to is the period of public consultation. The Community Council, as a statutory consultee, has a different right of access to the planning list. We receive it ahead of the publication, and as soon as we received it, we lodged our consultation objection as a statutory consultee. Basically, just to unpack it further, as you've asked the question, the application form that was made for the listed building consent was wrongly completed. It described the architects as the owners of the property. When this was pointed out to the planning officers in September, instead of actually asking the applicant to withdraw the application and resubmit, they simply had a new form filled out and chucked it online. Now, the problem with that is that it means that every single member of the public that looked at this application online after the 6th of August saw a form that was wrongly completed. And that, in my view, and in the view of others, is a material consideration. Because if that is wrongly completed, then the information that was available to the public during the public consultation period was problematic. And it's not just simply not good enough for planning officers to say, oh, submit another form after the public have had their opportunity to comment. The Community Council commented literally within days of this appearing on the planning list, which we get ahead of the members of the public, because we already knew our views, because we'd already held our meeting with the Peterborough Moat Brae Trust representatives. So it's not I don't think there's any, and perhaps I haven't explained it properly, but it's not a question of me having my rights diminished. It's the general public having their rights diminished when this application was first published, because the form is basically wrong. Now, whether it was completed wrongly out of a mistake or it was completed wrongly deliberately, you and I are never going to tell because we didn't write it. But the fact is that what was available to the general public was not correct. Simple.
I'm sure we'll ask the questions about the process when we get into a session with regard to the officer, but I'm sure you'll also be aware that a view is not a planning issue. So therefore, I'll take that information in my own head when it comes to determining. So a view is not a planning determination.
With the greatest respect, it's not a view, it's a process. It's a form which was filled out wrongly.
I understand. What you said was people can see it from across the river. So
oh, that view? I'm ever so sorry. I thought you were talking about my views on the application.
Can I just say that you're a wee bit misleading yourself, Father Crosby, when you say there's no letters of support. There's a letter of support for the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland in there.
I can't comment on that, but I believe that it was their intention to try and influence an amendment to the drawings, if you read the whole letter.
Any more questions for Father Crosby?
Thank you, members.
Take your seat back. Right. Anne Lindsay, next objector. You've got 3 minutes.
I only have 3 minutes. Understood I had 6 because of 2 application numbers.
The item has been dealt with as one, so therefore it's 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
I'll have to speak quickly then. So others are speaking to the design of the Moat Brae house extensions. Will the proposed extensions enhance or degrade the surrounding area? I want to talk about the purpose of the extensions. So Moat Brae Trust identified the need for a children's literature and storytelling centre. But with all due respect, Chairman, elected members and Trust members, we have a children's literature centre. We call it the library, or I should say libraries. In Dumfries Township alone, we have the Ewart Library and 3 additional branch libraries. We have librarians. Librarians do more than place books on shelves. They have advanced degrees in library and information science. They understand the power of storytelling better than most of us. I visited the Ewart Children's Library the week before last. It's a beautiful space, able to host up to 70 children at a time, school age and preschool children. Key library staff are trained and qualified by the Scottish Book Trust to work with groups of kids, to help them become enthusiastic readers, researchers and learners, to love literature. We have a literature centre, the library. Our library is well endowed. Our region carries more than 82,000 children's titles. The Ewart Library alone has 5,500 children's books, Kids get to take these books home. There are multiple copies of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, illustrated. At our libraries, children with sensory deficits are not overlooked. Our library system provides e-books and large print books. The libraries are funded by our council, thank you, and by the taxes we pay, and it's money well spent. We all know the link between availability of reading material and literacy. Our libraries are available to all children from all income levels at no cost. There are no entry fees. Moat Brae House will be a storytelling centre, but Dumfries already is a storytelling centre. We have thousands of storytellers. We call them parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, siblings, friends, teachers, and yes, our trained staff at our libraries. And our storytellers provide their services free of charge. I had a look at the Scottish Storyteller website. The recommended rates for professional storytellers is £120 for a half day plus travel expenses.
And you have 30 seconds to...
Oh my. Okay, I understand I'll curtail that. I understand there are plans to improve the Moat Brae garden. I wish the plans didn't involve cutting down trees. The improved garden will incorporate 20 play features inspired by the Peter Pan story, including a fairy bower, pirate's lookout point, a crocodile and a Wendy house. The garden Barry played in at Moat Brae became, he said, an enchanted land. He used his imagination. It was a lovely natural garden.
Could you finish off, Anne, please?
I'm going to finish. It was a lovely natural garden with fabulous trees, a place where Barry's imagination took over without the need of props. That lovely natural garden is now slated to become a theme park. You won't need to go to LA. Disneyland will have come to Dumfries. I could say more, but that's my 3 minutes up.
Thank you, Anne. Could you remain in your seat in case there are any questions from the members?
Thank you.
Members, any questions for Lindsay? Anne? You may take your seat. Could have, that's the objectors, could have the applicant and the agent, Dame Barbara Kelly and Mark Hopton. And you have 3 minutes as well.
Chairman, do we have 3 minutes each or 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay. Well, Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you, and I've brought our architect, Mark Hopton, who's here to support me as well. Today is an important milestone for the Peter Pan Moat Brae project, and of course for Dumfries. It's the culmination of 5 years of hard work, determination, and commitment by our trustees, by our dedicated staff, and with the support of our many supporters and friends, including Creative Scotland, Heritage Lottery Fund and Historic Scotland. We're in no doubt that this is a most valuable and exciting project for Dumfries Town Centre, and that it could become the focus for local, national and international visitors. And of course a driver for the local economy, contributing to the economic, social and cultural regeneration of Dumfries, and with the potential to create, we think, up to approximately 35 jobs. We've worked hard to devise a project which is exciting and visionary, while at the same time realistic, practical and sustainable. The future of Moat Brae, the successful future of Moat Brae, has been our focus from the start. The architectural proposals have been the subject of informal consultation with hundreds of visitors to the house. We reckon we've had over 1,500 to date, and the comments from those have been overwhelmingly positive. And can I just make the point that the house would not have been saved if a new use had not been found. It will celebrate not only children's literature, but the work of Walter Newell. It will celebrate the story of J.M. Barrie's time in Dumfries and celebrate the history of the nursing home. So a lot of strands to the story. If I can just say also that the house would not have been saved if a new use had not been found, and I think that's terribly important. Finally, just to mention that our design team was chosen by rigorous national competition. We chose LDN because of their experience working in historic houses. including Abbotsford and the Assembly Rooms in Edinburgh. And they're the only UK firm to win a European Union Award for Cultural Heritage. Mark.
Thank you. If I've got
So
just
you
a
get
few,
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, I can't cover all the points that have been raised about design issues, but the rationale for the design approach is set out in the design statement, which has been accepted by the planning officers. It's been the subject of much discussion with our client and also with consultations with Historic Scotland and the planning and the conservation officer. We think it's been a very positive process of consultation to date, and we're delighted that the report acknowledges the high quality of the design. I think best, if you've got questions for me about particular aspects of it, that's probably better than me carrying on further.
That's fine. Time's up anyway. Members? Ivor?
I've sort of sympathies with the idea of symmetry when it comes to buildings like this. I think building is really good. However, when you have to get round issues with land, etc., we have the Moat Brae sign there on that picture. Why does it have to be there, and why can't the lift be incorporated within the building?
I think that's one of the conditions of the planning listed building consent. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Is the detail of that sign and the materiality of the lift tower. It's down as a condition. I think we accept as a client and an architect that that is not right yet. It needs to be reduced in size, and it doesn't need to be as graphic as it is on that image. It's a short answer. We think there's more fine-tuning of that to be done, and the condition's the right way to do it.
Come back in.
Can I add something to that, Chairman? Yes. Yeah. Someone has mentioned the fact that we should be considering putting the lift and all of the access arrangements back inside the house itself. And I have to say that the trustees have been pretty unanimous in their view that we should try to restore the house to what it was when Walter Neal designed it and built it. And to suggest that the interior of the house has been destroyed is an over-exaggeration. We have managed to save elements of all of the interior decoration, which will be restored at the point when we start the project. The whole of the ground floor will return to what it was in Walter Newell's day.
Would I be allowed to just say another few words about it?
Do we want to come back in, Ivor? Can I just remember the applicants to switch the mics off when they finish speaking?
Just with regard to possible, have you considered natural stone for the sort of signage bit? Because I know in the past we'd asked for something on one of the buildings in a conservation area, and Historic Scotland came back and put something totally different and inappropriate, I would have said. But that's my view in it. And it's the one building we've had in Dumfries that's been a big complaint. Have you got the ability to have natural stone in there rather than modern materials?
In response to that, this is a really difficult design to get right. Moat Brae originally was meant to be the end of a terrace. Now, we think that has not been achieved over the last 200 years. It's unlikely ever to be achieved. The quality of J.M. Barrie House as a piece of architecture is not great, and we need to balance getting a new entrance in that's accessible, does all the practical things that Moat Brae House needs, without linking Moat Brae House itself to the terrace visually. Now, taking the lift and the stair out of the house allows us to return the Walter Newell design to its original, the rooms to their original form. The lift takes up a huge part of the interior of the house. The lift tower, as it keeps getting called, is not really a tower. It's an end to Moat Brae itself. We split it off from Moat Brae House to try with a strip of glass down the gable. You'll remember from the original photos that the gable was never meant to be seen. It's all rough stonework and things. It was meant to be internal. We tried to split the lift off the battery pack, we call it, off the building with a strip of glass. The materiality of it is meant to suggest that there was that Moat Brae was joined to other things in the past, or was intended to be joined to other things. That's why it comes up to the parapet level, but no higher. In terms of materiality, we've had long discussions, as you'd expect, with the trustees of the Peter Pan Moat Brae Trust about what that should be, and indeed with the planning officers and the conservation officer and Historic Scotland. Our view, and this is what's in the planning, application is that it should be a bronze material, a metal. Now that's a material that patinates sympathetically, and it's a copper-like material. It patinates nicely over time. It's sympathetic to the pink or the red sandstone of Moat Brae House itself, but it's not the same as it. We don't want to confuse it visually with the sandstone of the house. That's the point where you start. Moat Brae is a beautiful standalone object. It's when you start then confusing it with another piece of sandstone next to it that we think visually you're creating a problem, which is why we've gone for a bronze, which is sympathetic rather than stonework.
Thanks, Chair. Given the nature of the bronze cladding, is there any risk that in the future we will have blue-green patches appearing on the surface?
No. It's a material that's treated on the surface now to keep its the patina that you get at the start.
Councillor Maitland.
I have two questions. The question number one is the curve on the Sedum roof. It's just a practical question. Why would you not have a puddle in the bottom of that and there being technical problems? Because J.M. Barry House doesn't want to look out onto thistles and weeds and God knows what growing on the top of the roof. We've got to think about them. And the second question is, I'm curious as to the building line. I see in here there's talk about access, and I don't understand why the building line of that lift arrangement doesn't sit slightly back from the house. I see why the glass panel, the connecting and yet not connecting section is there. That's very clear. But I'm not absolutely clear as to the building line. Maybe you could help me on that, please.
Taking the building line to there is a function of, one, there's a practical function about the space that you need at the bottom of the stair before you get to the door, before you come out onto the street. There's 1,500 millimetres so needed there. But the design intent comes from trying to replicate what might have been the elevation coming along the street from that point. It's meant to suggest that the idea that there was meant to be a continuation of the buildings along at that line. That's why we brought it out the same line as Moat Brae elevation.
I think we should also, I think it's worth explaining that the level of the pavement is lower than the level of the first floor, the ground floor of the house, and we have to have a slight slope up from the pavement to allow us to access with wheelchairs or whatever into the main house. I think it's really important. And unless you go to the gap site and look at the difference in height between the pavement and where that entry will take place, it's quite difficult to appreciate just the scale of that.
Councillor Crothers. No.
Oh yes,
Sorry, it is curved. Conceptually, it's meant to be a piece of the garden that lifts up and floats up into the street, linking the street with the garden rather than trying to create another piece of frontage. That said, we were really, I was interested, in terms of the view from J.M. Barry House, the height of the building is meant to relate to it's below the level of the flats in the upper levels. So they will be looking down on it, and we felt it was better to be looking down on a sedum, which is essentially heathers and mosses and greenery, rather than on what would be a felt or a lead roof or something like that. So it was giving not quite a piece of the keeping not quite a piece of the garden, at least the greenery or the sense of the garden at that level. In terms of the drainage, yes, we need to make sure the curve is right, and that will be a technical design that we develop with hopefully with the firm that build that roof to make sure it all falls in the right direction and doesn't puddle, because I think my professional indemnity insurance might not be very happy about that.
Can you see her behind Ian? Councillor Crothers.
Chairman, the question was asked from Ivor in regards to trying to retain the integrity of the internal side of the building, but would it be fair for me to ask the question? There was a lot of comments made earlier in regards to objections. Have you got any comments in towards any of the comments that were made earlier? There were some rather strong or harsh arguments you could say that were made. So I mean, if there's any points you'd like to pick up on in regards to that, rather than going through, because there's so many, rather than go through them all?
In terms of the design, we've tried to justify it as best as we possibly can in terms of the design statement and what I've been telling you today. I think, I know from long experiences, that I can't change people that feel strongly against things like this. What I do know is that we're complying with planning policies. We think we've worked really hard with the client and others to get the scheme right. In terms of the inside of the house, the real intention is to restore the Walter New interiors to their original design intent. On the upper levels, the main change is to rooms that have been destroyed anyway through the rot and that have happened. I think one comment was made about the staircase, and that's something the original staircase was a really tight winding stair. It's gone now, there is evidence of it, and in theory we could put it back. But the use of the house is changing to a centre for children's literature that needs public access to the top floor. So we would like to change the design of that stair and make it a bit more accessible. That's the main changes in town.
Councillor Crothers. Sorry, Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. When you travel up and down Scotland, you see a lot of historical buildings where new appendices have been attached to these things. Some, in my case, enhancing, some not doing so well. And you talked about looking at other buildings across Scotland doing this. I'm just wondering what type of research that you actually did into coming forward with this actual plan and enhancing the original building is what you said with regard to the coppering of the left side of things. Just give me an idea of what sort of work was done into looking at other buildings and seeing how we can enhance this one.
Can I start on that by saying that trustees and staff have visited a large number of historic houses around Scotland to do just that sort of research. And we've come back, we've mulled over that, and we've tried to come up with a design that is informed by those visits. And of course, Mark himself has been responsible for the development of several of those historic houses as part of his work in his company.
I've worked for a firm of architects for 26 years now, which specialises in work to historic buildings. So we've built up a reasonable portfolio of work from our work at Abbotsford, most recently through to historic buildings and visitor centres elsewhere in Edinburgh and elsewhere. We work with Historic Scotland and with your planning officers when we're developing these projects. This one, as I said at the start, is having to do quite a number of different things in terms of getting access to the garden. The setting of the house and the balance of the house is one of these issues, and the extension to it is part of that. When we were appointed to the project, there'd actually been a feasibility study carried out into this, which I think was discussed with planning officers, that showed a 3-storey extension against Moat Brae House. And actually it showed all the problems that you get to when you try and do that. Moat Brae is beautifully proportioned. And when you try and set something in that narrow gap site along it and not relate it to J.M. Barry House, but try and pick up all the lines and everything else, you end up with a really horrible, insubstantial piece of work. It just doesn't work. So you need to step back from that and look what we can do. And that's what we've come up with.
Thank you. Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking that the area where the new proposed building is between J.M. Barry Harris and Moat Brae, there was an existing building there that was used as an old operating theatre or something? And this may be considered an improvement to what was already there?
That was our starting point. There was two buildings there. There was the operating theatre which projected out into the garden, so there's the footprint of that already projected out, and that really was an ugly building. There was also a conservatory or a greenhouse sitting on the gable of Moat Brae House, facing west for much of the 19th and into the 20th century.
Which I was told this morning was the morgue.
Not sure that helps. But so our idea was to, the starting point again is to provide a sort of garden type building as much as more than a street front building in that location. So I have to say the extension facing the east, something was made about the end elevation of the house. It was originally the end elevation of the house. It now faces into a really dark and dank part of the garden. The garden originally was The garden wall was actually originally much more to the street front of Moat Brae House. With the building of the science block of the school, the walls moved in, and it's also become 2.5, 3 metres high around that area. It's not a nice part of the garden. The two extensions are meant to wrap round the edges of the garden so that the focus is all into the garden rather than what's on round about them.
Thank you. Ivor?
Just with this not being a residential property and we have the grass roof, what are you doing? Because one of the conditions we usually put on, and I don't see it in here, is to actually seagull-proof the roof so that we're not going to be tormented by seagulls in this area in the future.
Can I just respond to that? Because it won't surprise you to know that the trustees have been very, very concerned about the fact that we need to make sure that we take action to prevent problems with seagulls.
Wires across the roof are the thing that we need to put in just above the level of the sedum. It's a difficult thing. There was a seagull nesting this year on the ground, just in there. We're certainly not making the situation any worse, but it is a flat area of roof that, well, the seagulls were nesting on the ground there before. We'll do all we can, but it's a problem throughout Dumfries.
Any other members' questions? I'd like to thank Dame Barbara and Mark very much. If they'd like to take their seats and switch the mics off. Members are now in session.
Just as an opening, Chairman, in regards to the procedural point, just for my own knowledge, I wonder, when the planning officers were looking at this case and this came to their attention, the process, there was a slight amendment, I think it was made to the application in regards to the ownership from what's been described. How much weight did they put towards what happened there, and how would that have normally been carried out? Was this carried out any different for any other application that would have been in front of them, or again, just so how much weight was given to that procedural? I mean, to me, it looks like you're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and there's been an amendment. I've seen things like that happen before, but just from a planning officer's point of view, material when it comes to planning policy procedure, was there any weight given towards it?
David?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a not uncommon problem. If somebody submits an application form and it laterally transpires there's an error with it, what you do is you go back and you ask them to amend it and sort that out. It's probably not appropriate for me to go into any more depth in this one because it is still the subject of a formal complaint, but suffice to say the stage 1 complaint was investigated by the head of planning and regulatory services and was not upheld. We're satisfied that it's competent for the members to consider the application today on that basis.
Ian, we'll come back.
So just for reassurance, and it was treated no different than it was any other application, no more weight or less weight was given?
Absolutely, it's a standard practice. If you find a fault, you resolve it.
Councillor Driver?
All right, Chair, it was the same question.
Ian, we'll come back in here.
I'm happy to kind of start the ball rolling. When I've looked at kind of, you've got the frontal view there in regards to, obviously read the papers, took on the comments of what was in the papers and what's been said as well. In particular, Father Crosby put forward some very strong arguments. I thought maybe a bit harsh and strong at times, but anyways, it's certainly it made the point. But when I look at that, look at it now, I think the actual the bookend or the extension on the side is a nice transition. Personally, that's my viewpoint, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And there's nothing at all at this moment in time where I'm possibly going against the recommendations that are in front of us, Chairman. So I'd like to hear what other members are saying, of course, but I mean, I'm certainly in support at this stage.
Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I would just cite 47, 48 and 49. Economic development, one of the Council's top priorities. The LDP of this Council supports development for tourist attractions, recreational facilities, and providing the support that the role and function of the town centre are appropriate in scale and character. And I would say that they are, and I agree with the conclusions of the planning officer and would support the recommendation.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, my attitude is quite straightforward in relation to this. Having listened to parties, having read the report, as far as I'm concerned, sir, I have no compunction whatsoever in moving, in fact, that the applications be granted on the basis set out in the report, and I'll do that.
Councillor Diggle.
I'll second that.
Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I think you were quite correct in, as Mr Hopkins said, to try and build a sandstone extensions would totally destroy the look of the place altogether. I think we've got a case in point up at Glasgow University at the Crichton where they linked two buildings with glass, and it worked great. And I think the same will happen here. Visually, I think it'll be okay. There's not got a great deal on the street front, and what's round the back, where it's seen for, is not a big issue. It'll be quite appreciated, I think, by the people that are able to look at it. Till he tidied the place up as much as anything. So I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations as well.
Councillor McKee, any other members? Ivor.
Chair, just with regard to the last point I made up, there's not a recommendation in here for the seagull proofing of the roof. And I was just wondering, with the proposal that came forward, was that subjected for listed building consent? And what's Historic Scotland's views on the placing of wires across the roof?
Take that one. Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. The issue of seagull proofing would involve the erection of netting and wires across the roof here, and that there is potentially a risk that it would be seen and seen as part of the overall proposal, potentially adversely in respect of the setting of the listed building. My view is that there may be alternative mechanisms, such as a proactive management mechanism, that may be more appropriate in this instance, rather than installation of netting across a building such as this. And if I can just expand on that further, that could potentially be dealt with by condition.
Chair, I was just going to suggest, could we tie it in with condition 1 for the different colours and materials that can be used? Is that the right one? It's a sort of expensive that goes to the listed building consent, Historic Scotland. I think that's one. Oh no, sorry. Maybe 2. The one that says that notwithstanding the details shown in the approved drawings, no consent is hereby granted for the finishes and detailing. Could we put it into that? Or would it be a brand new condition, just suspensive, that once it's agreed?
Chair, yes, I think that's probably the most appropriate one. Condition 2 is already a suspensive condition, so just by adding in a requirement to include details of how they propose to seagull proof that extension.
Councillor McCaughrery.
Thanks, Chair. I think there were 1 or 2 concerns, but in the main, I think I would go along with the recommendations. I think, put into context, I think most folk in the Dumfries would welcome this. If you actually look at the list of objections, there only actually has 9 residents of Dumfries objected, and further 4 objected to the second, the historic buildings application. So I think the majority of folk in the Dumfries are supportive of this, and it's a small minority who are against it.
Is there any other member? I've got a recommendation. Is there any other member? Any others minded? So that's agreed. Recommendation.
Can I just clarify for a second there? We have a motion that was seconded for approve as detailed in the report, and we also have from Councillor Hislop to approve subject to the addition of the in the suspensive in condition 2.
Councillor Diggle.
I'm happy to go with that and accept.
Thank you. Decision is approve subject to the conditions as detailed in the report with insertion to condition 2.
Move on to item 5, Gallamair, Eastback, Thornhill, number 14-B-3-0389. local application, and the officer is Peter Barker. Right, off we go. You go through it, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for essentially a replacement group dwelling scheme at the top end of Thornhill on a road called East Back or Back Lane or East Back Lane. It has various names, just on the back side of the main street there. The proposal is to essentially, I'll just go back, the existing site is occupied by a single block set slightly diagonally across the entrance to the site, which was a block which was built built around 1991, but has sort of since fallen into disuse and is unsatisfactory in terms of accommodation needs in today's climate. The proposal is to replace it actually with two fresh blocks, single-story height, fairly traditional appearance, sort of terrace, two terrace bungalow blocks, sort of running perpendicular from the road edge and into the site. Just going to the site itself, this is from the site entrance, or the existing site entrance, looking northwards along East Back. You can see the general streetscape on the right-hand side being more sort of like frontage type development, and on the left-hand side there being more the rears of the development, which obviously faces the main street in Thornhill. Just sort of panning slightly to the right of the last camera position, just looking diagonally slightly into the site now. You'll see the nearest dwelling being a detached house to the north. Just swinging slightly further into the site, we're seeing the existing buildings, you know, not unpleasant appearance, sort of fairly modern, but as I said earlier, they seem to have sort of lost their usefulness in terms of the needs of the current applicant, at least. And just swinging a little bit further around, looking back down the street, southwards, and again the same theme with the rears of the frontage houses on the right and more frontage development on the left. Just going into the site now, that is a shot looking at the dwelling on the road frontage on the south side of the existing access. And you'll of things to note here are the existing trees and existing boundary hedge, which provide some sort of screening and barrier to the dwelling to the south from the existing development. And you'll see the parking area there that exists at the minute. The new development is actually almost like a mirror image of the existing, insofar as the new build will be largely on where the car parking is of the old one, and vice versa. Again, just looking slightly left of the last shot at the next dwelling, which is in tandem to the frontage building. There again, just showing a few gaps in the hedge. Whoops, we seem to have lost the. Whoops, we're back again now. Sorry. Seem to have a technical fault here. Pardon? Oh, sorry.
I'll just talk. I'll just talk to this one if you can hear me then. And then just to the, this is good, this is a bit awkward. Then just to the left of the last dwelling which you saw, that one is effectively a vacant plot, which is once again in tandem to the frontage dwellings, and you'll note the sort of screen boundary there at the moment, and once again with the gaps in the existing hedge. Again, just panning round, this is the site of the second block, which is effectively bordering onto open countryside, but is still within the built-up limits, or defined built-up limits, I should say, of Thornhill. Sorry, I've got the other picture back now. So several of the trees which you see, which are sort of, well, not what I'd call mature, but sort of not saplings. You know, they're obviously 15, 20 years old. Many of those trees would actually be removed. This is looking into the paddock area, which actually forms the second, the site of the second block. In summary, the proposal is effectively the straight replacement of buildings on a site that's currently developed, or largely currently developed, albeit the secondary area, which forms part of the site curtilage, which you see on the slide in front of you, that is also to form part of the development. But effectively, in map form, because this second portion of the site, or the undeveloped portion of the site currently, it actually wraps around slightly the back of the existing built-up form of Thornhill, and therefore it isn't actually intrusive into open countryside. I think that's probably all I need to say at this point. The report lists the recommendation and the conditions which are proposed to be attached. Thank you.
Members got any questions for Peter?
Peter, could you maybe just expand on 4.7, page 41, where in your report you talk about the layout plan submitted shows the loss of one smaller established tree to the north of 1 Maxwell Park, and also the site central dividing row of trees. And the report for that 4.7 finishes by saying the removal of only one minor tree is not considered to represent significant detrimental impact in comparison to the established situation. So you're moving one tree, or you're moving a number of trees? Because the report seems to say both. Right.
I'll just clarify that, if I may. The slide which I've just gone back to shows the existing situation, which shows a roadside tree just in front of the white car there, which it's proposed to keep. The next tree is to the left of it, the slightly more lightly coloured one. That's the one that's proposed to be removed. The existing boundary hedge is proposed to be retained. But what that paragraph is saying, in effect, was that the removal of that smaller tree would actually, in my opinion, improve the amenity of the dwelling to the south in terms of light and that. And you'll see from the windows actually on the gable there of that house that there aren't really any habitable windows as such to be affected in terms of overlooking or whatever. So in summary, my opinion was that the amenity for that dwelling would actually be improved as a result of the removal of that tree. The other trees, which are proposed to be removed, are the ones which you see on the wall behind me, which effectively divide the existing developed site from the current vacant part of the site, the paddock area. So it's effectively that line of trees which you're seeing just following the fence line there.
Thanks for that, Peter. And they don't provide screening in any way for any other properties, do they?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said thanks for explaining that, and my final point was, do these trees provide screening for any other properties in the vicinity?
No, these trees, as I said, they actually form the dividing line between the two halves of the site, and therefore they aren't in the vicinity of any other properties. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor McKee.
Aye, thanks, Chair. It's just, okay, I don't know, you haven't got a plan of the layout, have you? The site layout? Chair, that on the left is what's existing, I take it? The kind of purple colour, pale colour.
That would actually be the car parking.
That's the car
proposal.
parking.
If Peter goes back a slide, the location plan there, you can see the existing buildings. So to a large degree, what they're almost doing is flipping it so that the car parking in the existing building lies to the south. And on the next slide, you'll see that the new buildings would be on the car park, and the car park would be where the new building is, more or less.
Yes, on the line of trees which we were talking about before is effectively running more or less sort of north to south, sort of over the bend of the plot there. So roughly running between blocks 1 and 2.
I take it we have an identifiable, or we will have an identifiable boundary there.
Sorry.
It'll be a fence.
Any other member? Question for Peter? Right, thanks very much, Peter. We've got no objectors to this application up for speaking. We have Fiona Pennington and Julie Slorak. Just remind you, you've got 3 minutes. You start.
Thank you. As a local organisation, Lorburn is passionately committed to improving the well-being of people in Dumfries and Galloway. Our work will contribute to the creation of balanced, sustainable and healthy communities that are attractive and safe. The site before members today is that of the former Abbeyfield Care Home, which has been vacant for some time. The Community Council is supportive of our proposals, which will create an additional 12 amenity properties in the town. The project was originally planned in conjunction with Dumfries and Galloway Council's services for older people, as there was an identified demand for this type of housing in the area. We're also aware of a demand from local people who may have to leave tied accommodation. I must highlight that the information outlined at 1.4 of the report is not permissible under current housing legislation. The homes will be available to all applicants on a common housing register who meet the criteria for amenity housing. However, we're committed to work with the community and local residents to offer assistance and support to local people who would like to make an application. We will also seek approval from the Common Housing Register panel to apply a local lettings initiative to the first allocations, which will give points for a local connection. Lorburn is committed to encouraging local applicants. Our RCC application has been submitted to the Roads Department, and our engineer has had discussions with them regarding the existing traffic calming on Back Lane. We will allow for the repositioning of the speed hump directly next to the proposed new entrance. We've been in contact with local residents following the submission of the letter to the Planning Authority outlining some concerns, and these have been addressed as follows. The hedge on the southern boundary will be retained and filled in as required to create screening for both sides. We have had a full tree survey carried out on the site. As a matter of safety, some trees are to be pruned and some will have to be removed to allow the new buildings. However, our proposals do allow for a number of new trees to be planted. It is our understanding, following discussion with the spokesperson for the local residents, that they are supportive of the proposals following confirmation from us over the concerns raised in the correspondence and assurance from Lorburn that the homes are for amenity allocations only. We're committed to continue working with the Community Council and local residents throughout the project. The site before members today is promoted with the full support of Dumfries and Galloway Council's strategic housing team and as a strategic priority in the affordable housing supply, in the SHIP. We're also receiving approximately £600,000 from the affordable housing supply. Our proposals conform to the recommended conditions on our application regarding the visibility displays, the gradient of the site entrance and the street lighting design. Thank you.
Thank you. Members?
Thanks, Chair. On page 40, section 4.4, it does mention that you considered reusing the existing building, but it was found not to be viable. Could you enlarge upon that, please?
Yes, certainly. I'm Julie Slark from Cameron's Architects. That was obviously our brief from Lowerburn was to utilise the existing building, but Abbeyfield had found that the building was not up to standard, the current standards, both from the Care Commission standards and also from the building regulations point of view. We had considered breaking through a couple of the bedrooms into one to make them obviously potentially bigger. But even those just weren't able to comply with the building regulations. So we were forever sort of finding problems with it.
Come back, Jim.
So in effect, it was simpler to knock the building down and start from scratch?
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Dempster.
Can I just thank you first for your observations on the way the local community, you dealt with the local community. I think that they're comforted by the correspondence you've entered into and the undertakings you've given. And I know in the report here it talks about landscaping and screening, and you're going to carry out a tree survey to determine species, quality and root protection. Does that mean that you're going to replace like for like, or if there are certain species that are foreign, maybe the wrong word, but you will do something to ensure that it enhances the area? That's the first question. And the second one is, normally when a development of a certain size is proposed, there's a figure of £1,500 per property commuted to the community to improve facilities locally, and that's normally a requirement the council look for. Is that something you've agreed, or have you been asked to do that yet?
On the latter point, I'm not aware of any financial contributions that are having to be made as far as this development is concerned. It may well be to do with the fact that they're all affordable housing. I'm not too sure on that aspect. I can certainly comment on the landscaping side of it. The tree survey has been carried out, and part of the confirmation of compliance with the current British standards with regards to constructing a building near trees, we have to have a root protection area essentially prepared. That has been carried out, and we've related that in the proposals. So of the existing trees that we can retain, and it's certainly our philosophy that we retain as many existing trees as possible, because it adds maturity to the development as well as the existing environmental aspect as well. Of the proposals for the landscaping, that will be dealt with as a condition to ensure that the proposed trees that we're wanting to use are appropriate to the area, and that will be dealt with under the condition.
Yeah, thanks for your response. I know that is the case. I just hope that as well as that you'll work with the local residents and assist them to develop with you a scheme that suits everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Geddes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's very much basically in the back of what Jim has just said in relation to paragraph 4.8, sir. You're talking about accessibility, and it says concern has been expressed by local residents about the control of construction traffic, so that the most direct route to Drumlandrick Street is A76 is taken. Now, I accept entirely that that's not at this stage of planning concern, but on the assumption, Chair, that the application is granted today, and that will be ultimately for members to decide later on in the process, can I take it that Loreburn would be cognizant of that fact, Chair, and would in fact be prepared to meet with the residents and get some sort of accommodation sorted out to allow these, what to me appear on the face of it, Chair, to be legitimate concerns resolved?
Can I just comment just purely from a design aspect? With obviously the CDM regulations, as designers we have to take cognizance of potential risks through the construction and maintenance and demolition of developments. that was an issue that was raised right at the start from our design approach, purely by the nature that it is a narrow road that's from an access point of view. Through the pre-construction information that's been prepared with the appointed CDMC for the project, that is a particular concern that has been raised and will be part of the tender submission for the contractors to make sure that that issue is dealt with safely, and it has been raised with the roads department as well. That will be discussed as to what the best approach would be, but certainly, if you want to comment on the Allfornoughthill side.
Yeah, thank you. I'd also like to add that we're due to attend Community Council meeting next week, and it's my understanding that a number of local residents are going to be present at that meeting to discuss various things about the application. We're certainly more than willing to maintain that dialogue until we go on site and throughout the project.
Thanks, Chair. That's helpful and reassuring. Thank you.
Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a question. Obviously, the removal of the one tree isn't considered significant detriment, and it's single-storey development that we're talking about. But I was just wondering on the street lighting, and obviously the removal of a tree and replacement with a street light might arguably be a sort of diminishment of amenity for the existing residents. So I'm just wondering, obviously there's a condition there, condition 7, to do with the street lighting plan, but would that be a factor in terms of where the street lights go if you're taking away a tree?
With regards to the street lighting, with the relocation of the road arrangement and the block, the existing tree that the planner has talked about is behind block 1, so therefore it's not going to affect any street lighting because the street lighting will be in front of block 1.
Any other member? Any questions for the... We're now in session. Right, thank you very much.
This is pretty straightforward for me, Chair. I'll just go with the recommendations within the report.
Jim.
Before we agree, I'd be curious to have a response from David about the commuted sum that we normally look for from developers. Now, I appreciate that it is what we describe as affordable housing, but that never stopped us getting that commuted sum before. It may be that amenity housing does, because normally we put it into play areas where we predict a lot of children would, or a proportion of children would be occupying these properties. But can you just respond on the commuted sum, David?
Yes, certainly. Where you have a new greenfield development, you normally look for the developers to actually provide a level of public open space that is proportionate. It's set out in Supplementary Planning Guidance number 1. And if you're more than 10 units, then you normally look for a small children's play area. This site is slightly different in as far as it's a brownfield redevelopment. There already is a development on that site which doesn't have such type of play area. Given the type of, it's a brownfield redevelopment on the same site that doesn't have any, and secondly, the type of development that is proposed, I don't think it was considered appropriate to try and seek either the provision or the type of commuted sum which is appropriate where it cannot be delivered. So it's not been requested in this instance for those reasons, but certainly if members are minded to do that, then you could do, but I would bear in mind the fact that that could have a knock-on effect to the deliverability of the actual development.
Jim?
Thanks for that response, David. I'm not going to argue with you today. Block 1 is a replacement. Block 2 is greenfield site, so there's a bit of both. I think what we'll do is we'll allow the organisation to discuss that with Thornhill Community Council and see if we can find some way of getting common ground that will give something back to the community in respect to what we look for as a commuted sum. But thanks for your advice and thank you, Chair.
Any other members? Agreed.
Thank you, members. The application has been approved as with conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
We go on to item 6, planning application for erection of dwelling house information access at 47 George Douglas Drive, Dumfries. Reference number 14-B-30394. And speaking for this is Andrew Robinson.
Just get this sorted out. Okay, right, thanks Chair. This is a full planning application for the erection of a single-storey dwelling house at George Douglas Drive, which is in the Traquair area of Dumfries. This map shows the application site and its surroundings, which is situated on the southern side of the road between two houses within a residential housing estate. There's a small field access track situated between the site and one of the adjoining properties. Before showing what's actually proposed, the next slide shows the appearance of the site and the surrounding locality. So this is looking towards the site from the road, which contains a Scottish Water pumping station at the front of the site. The access field, which I referred to before, is just shown on the right there. This is a close-up shot of the pumping station at the front of the site. This is looking towards the property to the east of the site, the closest of which is number 47. And this is looking towards the west, where the closest property is that one there, which is number 49. This is the site where the dwelling house is proposed, and this is looking towards the neighbouring property, number 47. And this is a close-up of the boundary treatment in the form of a timber fence. This is looking north across the site, so you can actually see the properties on the opposite side of George Douglas Drive in the foreground, and then beyond that, properties on Priestlands Drive behind. This is the boundary with number 49, and you can see the field access in the foreground, and this just shows the application site on the right-hand side and the adjoining property on the left-hand side. And behind the site to the south is a field, or open field, and this is them there. For those who aren't familiar with the appearance of George Douglas Drive, this is looking to the west. It's a residential housing estate constructed in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it comprises single-storey dwelling houses with a mixture of pitched and hipped roofs. This is looking to the west of the site, and this is looking to the east. In terms of what's proposed, this is a site plan which shows the dwelling house and in relation to the two adjoining properties and those further away. This is the proposed appearance of the house. It's proposed to be a single-storey dwelling house with a pitched and hipped roof. And in the context of the street scene, it was requested that a street elevation submitted to show the proposed scale and massing of the house in comparison to neighbouring dwellings, and this slide shows that the property proposed is actually in the middle there. And this is the proposed floor plan of the dwelling house. There's references made in the planning committee report regarding the planning history of the site and the open space strategy that's been recently published. This is the site plan which was approved for the George Douglas Drive housing development, and you can just see the top slide's the full site plan of the estate. The one in the bottom left-hand corner is a close-up of the site, and you can see that it was intended at the time to be open space, so that's what it was proposed as at the planning application stage. In terms of the open space strategy that's just been submitted, this accompanies the new local development plan, and it identifies all open space typologies in 48 settlements within Dumfries and Galloway. For Dumfries, this screenshot's a close-up of the area concerned, and it shows the proposed site, which is highlighted, and areas of open space that are actually identified within that document are shown there, and the proposed site hasn't actually been included within this strategy. And in terms of visual appearance of some of these areas of open space, you could see Hamilton Stark Park is one of the biggest on there, and there is a connection between numbers 31 and 33 via this footpath to that open space area. And to the rear of Priestlands Drive, there's this play area which is next to Traquair Primary School, and then going further into the site, there's an amenity space area as well. So in conclusion, it's considered that the proposed development would not conflict with any of the policies in the local development plan, including the recently published open space strategy, and the proposal is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions outlined in the report.
Members?
Thanks, Chair. I've got concerns about the distance between the two houses, between 47 and this new house, proposed house. The proposed house is about 900 millimetres for the fence, according to the applicant. I don't know what the distance is, the other house, from the fence, but it has windows which look towards the fence, so we've got overlooking issues. And I think the proposed house has also windows in that gable side as well, which seems contrary to previous plans where I think it is a minimum 18 feet between buildings for overlooking and that sort of thing. And that doesn't seem to be getting applied in this situation. I recognise the difficulties that you've got. I get the impression actually that number 47 should have been turned round a wee bit to follow the road a bit better. But it's the distance between the two houses, the proposed house and the existing house at 47, which appears to be below the standards that have been set by planning.
There's no standards in terms of how far houses have to be off a boundary. In fact, I think it's mentioned in one of the paragraphs. Properties have a right to construct up to their boundaries, and that's particularly the case with household and permitted development rights, which allow properties to extend to a boundary. In terms of windows, there is a standard 18-metre window-to-window distances, but whether that includes gable end windows is open to question, really. It tends to be looking at sort of rear elevation back-to-back in terms of distances. There is a window proposed on the side of the proposed house, and they are proposed to be obscurely glazed, and there's a condition attached to ensure that that remains the case, so that there is no overlooking between. But I don't think the two windows would actually be looking into each other. Does that answer the question?
Councillor Witts.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like the officer to give me some clarification regarding the comments on page 50 in the planning history and the second item, 99/P/3/0067, full planning permission approved for erection of 27 dwelling houses, and that was 1999. I take it that permission incorporated this site, obviously not 27 houses on this site. What other sites were included in this permission? Maybe you alluded to that already, but I'd be grateful for some clarification.
Yeah, that planning permission actually relates to this development, which includes the site and the surrounding property. So that the top plan there actually shows what that permission relates to. But the site itself falls within that permission, and within that permission it was designated to be open space.
Come back in, Alistair.
Thanks. So presumably this permission was superseded subsequently, and with my memory, local knowledge kind of eludes me at this point. Would that be some short time, a few years later, that a subsequent planning application came forward and was accepted?
No, the permission that was as implemented was from this permission. There was a non-material variation approved in terms of the layout, but it was that permission which was implemented for the housing estate.
Stephen.
Thank you. It was just really to do with the substation, the Scottish Water bit at the sort of front part of the site, where it would sort of join the road. And just looking at the character of the development round about it, it would seem to be sort of incongruous visually in that sense, in terms of like the view from the road. given that there's a sort of side access going down a wee sort of farm track, but I can't see anywhere else where that's obviously an unusual arrangement in terms of the rest of the development. I was just wondering where that sat with how you weighed up the report.
Is that in terms of the visual impact of the substation, or the visual impact of the substation and the dwelling house combined together?
I think, you know, if you were to take a view of the, I don't know if you can go back to one of the slides which shows the sort of character of the surrounding houses and where the plot sits with that. Yeah, that's probably a good one. So, yeah, so I suppose the natural view of the sort of development would be that each house has a frontage onto the whichever road it's served by, whereas this one would be slightly unusual in the respect that there'd be a substation in front of it. So I was just wondering, how does that congruity sort of get addressed?
It's been taken into consideration in terms of the wider context of there's nothing that can be done about the fact that Scottish Water substation's there. We've looked at the visual impact of the house as itself and how it would relate to neighbouring dwellings. Although it wouldn't be a particularly great arrangement, it's the development of that site. Looking at the visual appearance of it now, it's being considered that actually a house on there would probably improve the visual amenity overall of that area.
Any other member? Yeah.
Actually, I'm looking at the conditions in the recommendations that approve the conditions, and it's what isn't there, and it's because it's been referred to as being previously being a piece of open space, and that's been the portion that's been applied. And usually, when somebody asks to develop on a piece of open space, it's usually going back to the commuted sum point that Jim was bringing up earlier, an open space commuted sum. In regards to that, I didn't see it within the conditions. Just if you could remind me how that applies in this case, please.
It's being referred to as an open space only in on the context of what it was originally intended for. The open space strategy doesn't actually define it as an open space. It could even be described as an area of grassland or scrubland. The reference to open space is just what it was originally intended to be. It's not being developed in that case. It's not being adopted by the council for whatever reason. But the developer contribution has been looked at, and it's been assessed in paragraph 4.11 in terms of the new developer contributions. And it was considered that this development wouldn't meet the threshold for a developer contribution because it's not actually an allocated area of open space.
Back there, Ian.
That just to finish, it was never ever allocated at the time of when the permission was granted as an open space. That's what you're saying.
It was intended to be an open space, and that's what the planning history dictated it as, but it hasn't actually been, for whatever reason, because it wasn't adopted by the council, it's not been maintained, and over time it's ended up in this current appearance.
Again, just for clarity, again, I don't think an open space doesn't have to be adopted by the council. I don't, that's certainly my understanding, because there's plenty in private ownership, and it can be quite contentious with residents when they realise that after they bought a house. So, I mean, I'm just finding that a wee bit difficult to put into context for the information that I've got in my mind, saying what an open space is. If it, as far as I was aware, if it had been identified through the plan permission, it was open space, and that was it. It was conclusive because it was being granted as through the permission that was granted at that time. It wouldn't change, it would still be a piece of open space. Therefore, I thought the open space commuted sum would have applied in this case. So it just
private land, Ian.
Yep.
Chair, if it can be of assistance, then paragraphs 4.7, 4.8 address this matter. I mean, ultimately, it's one of these ones with the benefit of hindsight. It would have been better, obviously, had that land been secured. You'd had conditions requiring it to be formed. I think there was, from memory, I think there was an issue about the builder actually going into receivership, which probably didn't help. Had this been a piece of land that was clearly identified, required, and it doesn't have to be, you're right, it doesn't have to be maintained by the council. It's usually better if it is. But if it had been properly taken into tied into title deeds, for example, where there's a factor looking after that sort of things which we look for now, doesn't appear to have been done back in 1999, I'm afraid. So we have a position now where we have a piece of land that on the original 1999 plan is shown an open space, but there's no planning hooks to really force it to be that, and it's in private ownership now, which means that it's just a piece of land that's in private ownership in the middle of a housing estate. So for those reasons, we didn't think it was appropriate to seek commuted payment in this instance. I know there was another one which is still ongoing and will come back to yourselves fairly soon in Port Patrick, where that was a little bit different. But this one is on its own merits. I think 4.7, 4.8 address those as best we can.
So McCaughey.
I'll come in an open session because I've got information that's...
Councillor Witts.
Thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Clearly, if we grant this application, the access to the Hamilton Historic Park will be no longer available through this open space. However,
there's no access to Hamilton Stark Park through that area. No access whatsoever.
I defer to the Councillor's superior knowledge, albeit that I did live not so far.
You sure you're on one of the slides, Alistair?
Right.
It's completely away.
Okay, my next point then was presumably there's access on the path between 31 and 33, and is that a core path?
That was shown just there. That's this part.
Any other members? We'll be going to session. You've got 3 minutes, I'll remind you, 30 seconds to go.
Good morning. I'm Alan Calder. I reside at 38 Douglas Drive, immediately opposite the plot. I've been asked to come along today to speak on behalf of Mrs. Gray, who is the owner of 47, an elderly lady who is in poor health at the moment and cannot be with us today. This statement was prepared by Mrs. Sheila Gray, who lives at 47 George Douglas Drive. I have lived at 47 George Douglas Drive since purchasing the property from the original developers Robison and Davison in 2002. I would urge the Planning Committee to reject this application because of the detrimental effect it will have on my property and on those of my neighbours. I have numerous concerns and grounds of objection, but in the time available, I will concentrate on the following issues. The original consent for the existing 27 dwellings on this part of George Douglas Drive designated the land, which is the subject of this planning application, as open space. The officer's report on page 54, paragraphs 4.7 and 4.8, quotes from the original planning condition regarding the requirement to, quote, maintain the open spaces in perpetuity, that is, forever, and the fact that the developer was to provide evidence to the council that this would happen. The officer then dismisses the protected status of this land because he has not found any record of how the land would be maintained within the council's case file. However, the original developer did put in place a legal agreement which would maintain the land in perpetuity, because he put this as an obligation into the title deeds of the adjoining properties on George Douglas Drive. I have a copy of my title deeds here, which clearly explains that. I and my neighbours have maintained this land over the years, including planting some shrubs and pruning the trees. The proposal will result in a loss of residential amenity to my property, causing increased noise, overlooking and overshadowing. The proposed new dwelling will be far too close to my house and will allow a view directly into my sitting room from the side of the projecting bay window.
30 seconds, Alan.
This will also lead to a noise nuisance when windows are open. My rear conservatory will now be dominated by a long blank wall and the overshadowing which will result from it. In terms of design, the many objections which have been submitted in relation to this proposal and in respect to earlier attempts, have pointed out the numerous errors on the drawings and the general poor quality of the design. I would particularly highlight the fact that the longest side of the building with the noisier public rooms has been placed next to my property at an extremely close distance. Please refuse this application.
Thank you very much. Any members got any questions for Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Calder, have you any idea what the distance is between Miss Gray's house and her fence?
I'm sorry, the only objection I had, the main objection I had, was that we were all told by the developers when we purchased our properties that that area would never be developed. It was green area, open space, and the main objection from all of us really, Mrs. Gray has her own objections because it impacts more on her, but our objection is that the council is planning to reverse an earlier decision. We bought our properties on the understanding that would never be developed, and now, how conveniently, we seem to be in a position where the council are going to overturn a previous one, moving the goalposts. I can't comment on details of the distances because my objection was the fact the plot should never have been developed or in the first place.
Andrew, you got any comments on that?
It's been highlighted within the report. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get the distance to try and answer the councillor's questions.
You come back to that.
So if you just come...
Ian, Brothers.
Chairman, as in regards to obviously something has to be tabled through the chair, and it's not, I wouldn't ask for that to happen, but there's new evidence being put in front of us today verbally. I would like to hear what that was in regards to the title. I wonder if we could ask for that to be read out specifically so I can get an understanding what that obligement is, please, Chairman.
What about that, Ian? Sorry.
Chair, if I can be of assistance with that. If there are, well, obviously what we have been told in the application form is that the applicant is the owner of that land. In the event that's not correct or there is some other burden on that land which gives a share of it to other parties, they would still need to be able to get all the legal permissions to be able to implement this. That's not the same as a planning application. So they're two separate pieces of documentation. The granting of planning permission does not necessarily mean it's going to happen. You can always apply for planning permission on pieces of land that you don't own. So they are two separate things.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. It was the thread between the commuted sum. I mean, because the advice that we've been given in regards to commuted sum, potentially, open space commuted sum, is that because it was never really bolted down, there's no conclusive evidence to say that was there. What I'm saying is, if it's contained within a title, there is conclusive evidence, and therefore that I think that would possibly have an effect on the potential for an open space commuted sum. That's the thread I'm trying to get to. So maybe a wee bit of advice on that from David in regards to that, please.
If members are, well, obviously there's still really questions at the moment for Mr. Calder. I'll be happy to answer that later on, if that's the appropriate time to do it.
I can now answer Councillor McKee's question. The proposed house is 0.8 metres, proposed to be 0.8 metres off the boundary. Number 47 is 1.6 metres off the boundary.
Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to Mr. Calder again, please. Can I just clarify something? Are you saying that in Mrs. Gray's deeds that the plot between 47 and 49 was designated as open space?
Yes, there are about 5 of us that I know of in the immediate vicinity, all have it in our deeds. There's a paragraph. It implies that the council may adopt it later. It clearly states that we would be obliged to help pay for the maintenance of this green area until such times as the council may adopt it. It refers to it perhaps becoming a play area at some later date, but it does state that we'd be obliged for the maintenance of this area when we purchase these properties, and we all have it in our deeds on the burdens, section 15. I have it in front of me here.
Members? Thanks very much, Alan.
Thank you.
So, members are now in session. Ian?
Just come back to that point, and I think it's been picked up by Peter as well in regards to David, and he's maybe got to come back with some thoughts on that. I mean, really, and that's where the thread I was coming from. If it's there's clear evidence now to say that's been applied today. Again, we've seen that today, and I'm not saying I'm for or against the actual application as it stands in front of us, but I've got a question over the consistency of approach in regards to the Dumfries and Galloway Council and the open space community sums. So really, really keen to hear advice from David on that, please.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously is something which we haven't been able to track down before, and it does shed a rather different light on it. In those circumstances, I mean, I don't retract a single thing I said about the separation between it being a civil matter and a planning matter, and you don't need to have a lot. What it does raise in my mind is the fact that if it is actually enshrined in title deeds that certain parties were required to maintain that piece of land, it does sort of imply that there's some legal responsibility or burden on them for this piece of land, which to me does raise the issue whether or not, as with the Port William, I think it was Port Patrick case, right? The element of a commuted sum might be appropriate in that instance. Given that, it might be appropriate to defer the application for us to investigate that matter further and bring it back to committee in due course.
First before we make that decision. Peter Diggle, Councillor Dick.
That's exactly what I was going to propose, a motion that we defer this matter for further investigation.
Councillor McKee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, where I stay, we've just went through a similar sort of issue over the last few years, where Robertson and Davison wouldn't accept they own the path and the trees up behind my house, but the council never accepted them or adopted them. R&D formed a company to look after them, and it immediately went into liquidation, and it's in the hands of liquidators. That path is now in the hands of liquidators. We asked for maintenance to be done, and they refused to do anything, but they offered to sell the land either to individual house owners or to us as a group. And that may be a similar situation.
I think this is what's in the actual title deeds.
Yeah, that's right. It's maybe different for us.
So McCarthy.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. This one's concerned me because I actually sat in the planning committee when this was granted. As far as I was concerned, that was open space. At the time the planning committee gave permission, that was designated open space. But a similar thing, the first development of George Douglas Drive, the first part of George Douglas Drive, the piece of open space in Atkinson Court was deemed to be open space. I suddenly found the time was off the council, 2 houses built there. Now I know for a fact that that land had been adopted by Nutberry District Council. What used to happen in the past was if the planning department on the region deemed something to be open space, it was up to the district council to adopt it because they were deemed to be the authority responsible for open space. At that time, Nutberry District Council used to ask for 15 times the annual maintenance costs. R&D were going through financial difficulties. They stopped handing ground over to the district council or its successor, which happened to be this council. What they were doing for a while was exactly what Mr. Calder has pointed out, and that was leaving it up to the residents, or R&D would maintain it themselves, hire a contractor from time to time. What they then started doing is, it's not a company that went bust, it's actually an actual company called Peveril, who then took over all the open ground maintenance on behalf of R&D, and they were actually charging householders, because further up in, I think it's Conway Court, they charge the householders there £200 per year to maintain the open space there. We've also got problems, and it comes back to this planning committee, designate open space, and then we don't follow it up, don't do anything about it. This council is at fault. If we as a planning committee are going to designate open space, we better make sure that people adhere to the conditions we put down, and we have not done that. We have failed as a council to do that as well. There's another piece of open space just down that pathway there. It was at Persimmon Homes at Holmwood Drive, built a path down from their houses to connect up with that pathway. I've got to ask every year for that to be maintained. I get it done in the grace and favour benefit, because again, it wasn't adopted by this council, even though this council put it on as a condition. So, I mean, I'm quite happy to go on with this deferral, but we've got to start looking at this policy of designating open space and then washing our hands of it. We've got a responsibility as a council as well, and I'm sick to death. We'll come to this planning committee and we designate open space areas and all this nonsense, and 5 or 6 years, 10 years down the line, oh, it's nothing to do with us. And it has got something to do with us. And I'm really, really annoyed about this instance here. Now, I'm happy to have it deferred, but I think we need to do a further investigation than just the title deeds.
Jane, Councillor Maitland.
Chairman, are we going to defer this? Because if we're going to defer this, it seems to me.
I've now got the motion's not been put through. Come at the end, yes, I say. I think the members still want to speak.
I think Councillor Diggle did put forward a motion. I'll second it.
Right, that's fine. Members. Jim Dempster.
I'm concerned about what we're doing now. Well, the last approval we granted, which was for 6 houses in a greenfield site, and we took no community sum on the basis that there'd be no...
Sorry, Councillor Dempster. I think Councillor Maitland.
I thought she seconded it, and that was... We'll go to that.
I have. It's procedural.
Usually it's 10
We now
members
need
of courtesy to let them speak before any decision's implemented.
I'm sorry, my understanding...
That is a motion. It's a motion. Motion's been put forward and seconded, but it's not been, as I say, allowing members to speak, to go through before we decide what we're going to do in that matter.
And if you're not going to allow that, I'll just simply put up an alternative proposal and I'll be allowed to speak to that anyway. And what I was going to say was we're having a difficulty here because we just allowed a greenfield site to be developed with 6 houses and asked for no community sum on the basis that the developer might not afford it. And here we're going to look for community sum on one, and we don't know whether the same circumstance will apply. But what my real question is what exactly we're going to investigate? Because we don't investigate private title deeds. That's not what we do as a council. We should be determining a plan application here, and then after that, if there's a civil matter, that's dealt with in another forum.
Chair, just to be clear, what the point I was getting at was to defer it to investigate the possibility of a commuted payment. I'm not going to investigate somebody's title deeds. That's not a planning matter.
I think at the moment we have a motion by Councillor Diggle to defer until further investigations have been carried out on this application, and that was seconded by Councillor Maitland. Has anybody got any other amendment to that?
Is that to defer this, as I say, we'll not be looking at it's community payback. Has that been deferred to look at the community payback part of that?
It wasn't me that moved it, but the point that I made earlier certainly was the fact that there was an inconsistency approach possibly because of the new evidence that had been that we'd actually seen at the committee this morning, that there might be actual clear evidence at the time. Councillor McCocktry's actually referred back in his memory to when the decision was made as well. It was absolutely designated as open space. Now, to be consistent in our approach as a council, then if that is the case, if that can be evidence, whether it's through a title deed or whether it's through Councillor McCocktry and finding the relevant information, because it's been brought in front of us today, we should be consistent in an open space community sum, not an affordable housing community sum, an open space community sum should be applied in this case, and that's the whole point I was trying to get to. No saying I'm for or against, it's just that particular point, and that's certainly why I think it should be deferred.
And I think that was Councillor Diggle's motion, the further investigations in relation to that sum that was seconded by Councillor Maitland.
So can I just be absolutely clear here before I put up an alternative proposal? We're deferring this to investigate whether or no a commuted sum should be sought. Nothing to do with title deeds. Fine. Don't understand it, but fine.
Is that right? The proposer of the motion? Is that correct?
Can I just ask, Chair, sorry to be awkward, but is it a competent motion? Can we do what or can the planners do what we're asking?
Well, the reason why I was suggesting this is because if you are, as a committee, now suddenly going to be putting on an onerous requirement to the applicant without having discussed it with them or giving them an opportunity to come back on this and say that the council is wanting to approve this subject to that, that's almost too onerous a thing to actually be putting on without any discussion with them. That's really the purpose that I would want to defer it, is to go back to the applicant who's not here today, not spoken, and inform them of the fact that there now appears to be an issue and there may be a requirement for a commuted sum and to run over that issue with them and then bring that back to committee. Because if they point blank refuse to accept that, then that obviously puts you in a position deciding whether to approve it or refuse it. But we don't have that information before us, and it's really that which I think is relevant for a deferral.
Councillor Diggle.
I think where I'm coming from on this one is we've got to establish whether this was actually designated as open space or not, for starters. And if it is open space, I would understand, but I could ask David, presumably we can't approve planning permission on it.
Well, you can always approve planning permission for houses on areas of open space. I mean, the slides that Andrew put up there quite clearly show that on the 1999 drawings, that area of land had the words open space on it. And paragraph 4.7, 4.8 addressed that. There was a condition 8 that looked about that requiring it to be retained in perpetuity. The difficulty is that we have not until now been able to establish if or when that ever came forward and that condition was complied with. What has cropped up today is that we're being told that people had that built into their title deeds. Okay, fine. That does indicate that there was a requirement for somebody to look after that and a recognition that it was supposed to be open space. So on that basis, I think we now have to go forward and saying it is open space, it was approved as that. Now we have to go back to the applicant and discuss with them the commuted sum, which now appears to be relevant.
Members happy?
Is the commuted sum for that piece of ground only? Because if it is, when they build, they'll probably have a garden, they'll maintain it.
Well, I think the point is that it's fairly clear that it was approved as open space in 1999. This is a commuted sum for the loss of that space. That's how, as a committee, you viewed that one in Port Patrick, I think it was, where you wanted us to actually go back and look into that further. And what the other critical thing is, if that sum is coming forward, how much is it and what's it going to go for? It can't just go into a black hole in the council coffers. It's got to be specific for something to offset the loss of that open space. So, for example, the nearby public open space would have a new piece of play equipment installed to make up for the loss of this piece of land.
Councillor Hislop.
Yeah, that went most of the way to answering my question, which would be on the fact that this was actually a piece of open land where the little bit at the front is, I would say, amenity space, the bit at the back is just rough land. How do you actually determine what's reasonable? Who does that? Because we had the one at Port Patrick where some members felt that it was reasonable to ask for more, some felt that what was there was acceptable. We don't really want this coming back to committee and we'll defer it for another day because we actually want 2 plots worth of money instead of 1 plot, and I don't know how you actually determine that to allow officers to have an idea of where they need to be so they can find a reasonable
The whole of that plot was open space.
Mr. McCaughey, through the chair.
Just pointing out the whole of that plot.
The member, once, as I say, there's members waiting to speak before you, Tom. Thanks, David. Councillor Maitland.
I don't know what the issue actually is, but if it's applied for, in the application it says that it's vacant agricultural space. And I don't know what the implications are of that. If it describes itself in the application as vacant agricultural.
Well, I think all we can do is look at the slide that Andrew put up, which dates it back to the original permission from 1999, which the 2 words open space are on that land. And therefore, it does appear that when it was originally granted, that was the intention for that area of land. The fact that it's now in private ownership and effectively it has become an overgrown piece of land is something which we obviously have to bear in mind. But nonetheless, the original permission would have clearly, in my mind, demonstrate that that was the intention, that that was to be open space.
I just come back to the consistency. I mean, I can take to sites in Gretna, Annan, Brightkirk, Eastriggs, Clarencefield, where they have had to pay an open space commuted sum, and the communities have benefited from that money being used on play equipment and such like. And I think we should have if it applies here, we should have the same approach if we allow people to construct and develop on open space. And that's where I'm coming from in particular. that we should have the same approach to everybody.
Councillor Geddes.
I would suggest that what Mr Sutty is proposing makes eminent good sense to me at least, and that's exactly the route down which I would suggest that we go. Thank you.
I don't think we can get into the civil side of it, but the planning side of it, I think we can definitely. Councillor you're what to speak?
As we don't get a point, to answer what Ivor was asking, the whole of that area at the planning committee in 1999 was designated as open space, and it was maintained for quite a number of years, because we're doing that way quite often. But I think for the future, we need to look as a council at our own policies in open space, because we seem to sit here at one meeting, grant permission for houses, and we don't have open space. 5 or 6 years down the road, somebody comes along, wants to build houses there. Oh, aye, that's fine, because we haven't imposed.
I think you're just repeating
properly.
yourself for what you said last time.
You know, I know. But I think we've got to take a look at it.
Sir Thompson.
Yeah, so just for clarity, I take it what we're not doing by doing this is actually looking at how well we enforce conditions. What we're actually looking at is what David suggested. So is there another way that we can help promote or address, whenever we do attach reasonable and necessary and enforceable conditions, that we actually do that? Because that seems to be the root of the issue, really.
Well, certainly I would hope that all the conditions that we use comply with Circular 4 1998, which do, one of the 6 tests is that it has to be enforceable. The difficulty with all these things, as ever, is it is resource intensive. It requires a lot of time from officers to actually go and chase these things up, make sure they are complied with. The good news is that we have recently, as part of the service review, those of you involved in that might recall that we recognised that there was actually a need for more enforcement officers, and Jessica and myself recently interviewed and will have come to the stage of just about appointing an extra 0.5 FTE planning inspector. So hopefully these matters will be looked at and so on.
Right, members agree, we'll defer this to get the community benefit. Right, I think we can take a hands a minute or half-hour comfort break. We go through half an hour, come back here at 1:20
I'll just application has been deferred for further investigations in relation to the commuter zone. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm we are quoted. Thank you.
Go to item 7 on the agenda, the erection of 2 domestic stable blocks at land at Auchen Castle, Beattock. Councillor Diggle.
I just wanted to declare an interest in this, Chairman. Mr Little, who's the agent, did some work for me some time ago, but I don't consider I need to leave the room.
Reference 14-P-40403. And speaking at this will be Jessica Taylor. There you go, Jessica.
Thank you. So this is an application for the erection of 2 domestic stables. The application site is outlined on red on the plan. So planning permission was granted by the Planning Application Committee in 2012 for an equestrian exercise area, hard standing and double stable. And the proposed stable is located to the southern end of the site next to the existing stable already approved. This slide shows the existing exercise area, and to the south is the stables and the proposed stable, and the access track, which is on the right-hand side of the slide. So the stables are of a typical size and construction, been timber cladding and under a corrugated tin roof. So looking through the photographs, this photograph is showing the junction from the public road onto the private access track, which is to the right. And this is looking along the road in the opposite direction with the access track just on the left-hand side beyond the end of the bridge pillar. So this photograph is along the private access track. going towards the site. And this is showing that the existing passing places already along the track. And this is stood on the track looking towards the application site, and you'll see the existing exercise area and the stables to the right hand side. And this is stood at the entrance to the site. In front of you are the existing stables, and to the right will be the proposed stables, and to the left is the exercise area. Again, this is just showing the site, so the exercise area in front of you and the stables to the right. And just to the left of the exercise area is the access to the paddock, which is also in the ownership of the. And again, it's just showing the access to the paddock and the exercise arena. And this is stood at the entrance to the site, looking along the track which goes beyond the proposed site. The application is recommended for approval as per the report.
Members, any members, questions for Jessica? Fine. Remind you, Mullins, you've got 3 minutes. I'll remind you 30 seconds to go.
Firstly, thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to speak today with regards to this application. Looking at the report, it's a very well prepared report and has a lot of information in it which is very clearly describing the development. I might be inclined on behalf of my client to disagree with the local roads officer, because I wonder if we could go to slide number 1, please. Thank you. We can see that the blue line on the right-hand side of the page is not shown either in the application site nor in the applicant's ownership. That is the very narrow lane, single track lane, up to my client's house, which is just off the bottom of the copy of the plan here in front of us. I think now Mrs. Moram of Valencians, the dwelling house at the south-east of that drawing there, I think she feels that this is still going to cause some sort of problems with traffic access and meeting. It's a single track road, you can see that from the photographs. And Mrs. Moram's probably, may I put it this way, a sprightly 80-year-old and goes up and down that track in a car quite often. To meet a horse box and trailer coming up the way in a 4-wheel drive, it's almost impossible to see out that access. It's a danger, we think, to road safety. It is a public road, it's a U road. And as you can see, if you can move further on with the photographs, as you get further up the hill, then round the corner, that on the right-hand side is the access to her house. The left-hand side, of course, is just the parking. So whilst I accept that this is a very well put together report, Chairman, what I am saying is I'm asking the committee to give an elderly lady that stayed in that area for 30-odd years a bit of consideration with regards to using the other access, the northmost access, which is a large double gate.
30 seconds, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's all I would like to say. If we could give my client some consideration on it, I'd be obliged. Thank you very much, Chair.
Is any members, any questions for Mr. Wilson? Thanks, Lawrence. You take your seat. Oh, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could I just ask Mr. Wilson, just regards to the proposal he had towards the end of his presentation there, he was suggesting access through another route. I wasn't clear about that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Councillor, the point is that at the blue line, the double blue line to the right of the red area delineated, now I understand that the red area delineated in the red crayon is the application site. But the access goes right up to that. Without that access, you cannot get into the application site from that narrow lane. However, if you follow it up to where it's showing in the photograph, the bridge, which is at the north part of that double blue line, immediately to your left, there is a large double farm gate. It's a galvanized double gate. It's probably about 15 foot wide, and it takes you into that site blue area delineated, owned by the applicant. If the applicant would consider, if the planning authority would consider that the applicant should come into that blue area rather than up the track with the horse boxes, it's a matter of safety. It would make my elderly client feel a bit more safe on that road, as it's just a single track road to the site. Thank you, Chair.
Just with regard to the existing stables, how do they gain access just now? Is it down the same road? So how would you be able to put a condition on that says one lorry can come down but the other one can't?
To the Chair, if I may, it's a fair point, Councillor. I accept that. But there's one thing for sure. If one lorry goes up and one lorry goes down, there's a trouble in the middle because there's no particular turning areas. As much as anything, I would say this is due to the age of my client. She's a sprightly 80-odd-year-old. But, and there are another two 90-year-olds off that track as well. It just so happens they've been there for 30-odd years, both families, and it's a single-lane track. If the applicant came off the top, it would make their life a lot easier. Thank you, Chair.
I'll just ask you a question, Lawrence. How many passing places are on that road?
If I may, Chair, there had only been one. Another one, I think, has been provided now. But it's a fair length, that road. Perhaps, Chair, maybe you have something that were there to be another couple of passing places, might be helpful.
Now, members? No, thanks, Lawrence. Right, members are now in session. No. The applicant can... Sorry, Richard, to another page. You've got 3 minutes, I'll let you know at 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Just a brief statement, really. I know the committee have been to this application site and done a site visit, so you'll be aware of the site. So just to be brief, really, in statement, the proposed horse boxes at land at Auchen Castle, Beattock, will give rise to no further use of the site and access track because visit times by Mr Vernon and his family of Carriggylands Village will be the same as current. There will be no additional people visiting the site as the riding arena is strictly for private use. The proposed stables will house horses currently present on the site. Thank you.
Thanks. Any members got any questions, Richard? No more questions. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Members, we're now in session. Councillor McKee.
Hi, Chair. I'd like to ask a question. I can recall this access up at the top end being raised when we considered this application the last time. Could anybody recall what happened with that at all?
David?
Yes, Chair. This was, I think it was July 2013. We'd visited it probably the month before. Those of us who did turn up there might recall that we drove down in a minibus and we parked at the entrance at the southernmost part, so it's just below the red line there. And I think most of us actually wandered up through the field to go to the northern section where there was an existing gate. The committee, when they considered it last time, felt it was going to be unduly onerous and costly for the applicant to put a new track running all the way through his field to come to the area, and were satisfied that the existing access was sufficient to service. So, in response to Mr Wilson's comment, really I would have to address your attention to the fact that this is an application for just the erection of the 2 stable blocks. There were a number of container units on site, which you might recall, those of you who were there, that have now gone, and this is really to replace those with a more acceptable permanent solution. But really, the principle of the use was established by the application in 2013. So all you can really address is going to be having these 2 additional stable blocks going to be such that it is going to create such an additional road nuisance that you actually justify having this route come all the way through the site.
Any other member? Ian, Councillor Crowthers.
Actually, did you say we're in session? Yes. Yeah, so I mean, I think, can taking it, because we've had an objection, we've heard that, we've heard conclusive evidence, I think, to state that the extra traffic generation isn't that substantial. In fact, we've evidence to say that there'll be no more traffic generation as far as the buildings there to replace some temporary accommodation. So I mean, I would happy to move the recommendations contained within the report, Chairman.
Agree the recommendations, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Item 8, an erection and extension to rear elevation installation of hip dormer at 35 Holmwood Drive, Langholm. Application number 14-P-4-0393. As we have, I'll take the planning officer once again is Jessica. I'll ask Jessica to take us through.
Thank you. So I say this is an application at 35 Holmwood Drive, Langholm, and it's proposed for erection of a rear extension and a dormer. The application site is outlined on the slide. And this is showing the existing site plan, showing the neighbouring properties are stepped, the applicant's property being the middle one. This slide shows the existing elevations and floor plans of a single-storey property. And these are the proposed elevations and floor plan, so it's showing a extension to the rear, and then on the side elevation there's a dormer, which will be obscurely glazed glass, and there is a condition to ensure that. So running through the photographs, this is the front elevation of the dwelling house, and this is looking from the application site, the front towards the neighbouring property, and again we're at the front of the property looking to the neighbouring property. And this is a photograph of the rear elevation of the dwelling, where the proposed extension will be. And now we're stood where the extension would be, looking towards the neighbouring property. And this is looking from the extension, the proposed extension to the property to the rear. The distance between the extension and the neighbouring property is approximately 23 metres. And again, this is looking from the application site, looking to the other neighbour. The application is recommended for approval as per the report.
Members, any questions for Jessica?
Can I just ask, it wasn't entirely clear to me whether there are changes in levels as you go along Holmwood Drive. As you go along Holmwood Drive, whether there are changes in levels. You can see the underbuilding there.
There is a slight change in levels from the neighbouring property.
The next one's higher, and does that mean the next one down is lower?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Chair. There's a slight drop down to the south, and also across the site as well, as you'll have noticed, to the east.
Okay, Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Chairman. It was a wee bit, and I think as we go from west to east, I think there's quite a considerable drop between the properties. And it's certainly from north to south is marginal, but from east. So in regards to 23 metres windy to windy, my question is that from the proposed extension, or is that from as exists? Do something at the 18-metre boundary windy to windy?
Yeah, my understanding is it's from the extension to the windows, so where the proposed windows of the extension will be to the existing windows of the neighbouring property.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. With reference to paragraph 4.5, could you confirm whether the extension is single storey or 1.5 storey?
Essentially 1.5, because it will have the space in the roof will join into the existing roof, which is why they need the dormer.
Councillor Hislop.
Chairman, looking at this, I had concerns with regard to the sunlight, but I think with the evidence that the photos show, the stepping down plus the fact that there's already existing sheds in that, I'd be happy to move the recommendations as proposed.
Not in session yet, Councillor.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification. We've heard that the window distance is 23 metres. I just wonder why we feel it necessary to put a condition on obscure glazing.
It's because the dormer actually faces to the north, so that will be looking over the rear garden, so they need the space, but to stop the overlooking.
Any other members? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Geddes.
We're in session, sir? No.
Members, we're now in session.
I would move the application be granted on the basis recommended in the report, sir.
Is that agreed? Any other member otherwise minded?
Thank you. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Right. Moving on to number 9. It's the formation of a wetland nature reserve and associated car parking, picnic area and wildlife garden at Crook of Baldoon Nature Reserve, Shell Road, Wigtown. Application 14-P-1-0293. And speaking at this will be Peter Barker.
Thanks, Chair. You have in front of you a fairly sort of brief but comprehensive report, nevertheless. Essentially, the application is brought before you because of its sheer ground area, but in terms of what it consists of, it's actually very, very little. Essentially, the RSPB have taken over the area of land marked in grey on the map in front of you, and they're developing it into a wildlife and wetland sort of bird reserve area. Specialising, I believe, in geese, because this is one of the sites where geese migrate and stop over to on their migration routes. Essentially, sorry, I'll start again. I mean, essentially, the site is in its early sort of vestiges of development. The RSPB have taken ownership, and they're gradually sort of going through the motions of enhancing the habitat to make it as ideal for the target wildlife as possible. The proposal concerns a few components. One is the development of or the formalisation of a car park at the steading, which is sort of at the central part of the site, and also the installation of a small picnic area. It doesn't show up very well there, but essentially it's just sort of putting in the basic infrastructure just to allow those components to take place. The main part of the works is actually the changing of the drainage regime in fields 1 and 5 to ensure that they flood more than they do at the moment. I mean, as you can see, the Cree estuaries on the right there, and the sort of area on the right there is mud flats at low tide, but
at certain high tides and certain weather conditions, the land on the margins of the coast is sort of prone to flooding. But really, the RSPB want to make sure that it just floods that little bit more, so that some of the flooded water is actually retained on the site, and at the same time, water draining sort of towards the sea is actually retained on the site as well, so that the areas hold more ponded water than they do at the moment. So really, the works involved are really to ensure that water is retained more on the site at the moment. So it's really just mainly blocking of ditches and just inserting the odd drain here and there. But really, very little earth movement or earth activity is actually involved in doing this. This is really just showing some of the sort of final ponding or proposed ponding arrangements which they're proposing. As I said, it's the reserve is in its early days. I suppose that really it's going to be like a mini Care Laverock type establishment. When they finish with it in their five-year development program. But essentially, the picnic area is in place already. They've got information boards. This is the area of car parking or proposed car parking, which I mentioned at the start of the talk. As you can see, the infrastructure is basically there. It's sort of fairly tidy and really sort of fairly discreet. And the grass, for example, has grown over the old hardcored farmyard there. So it's sort of very pleasing to the eye and fits in the estuary environment very well indeed. Access is from the main sort of Marcus Spine Road, from a road called Shell Road, which at its proximity closest to the site just merges into an unmade track. But I say unmade, but it's actually quite well maintained. So access to the site is quite satisfactory. Just looking over the fields, that's the southern field, which is proposed to increase the ponding arrangements on. That's the southern part of the northern field where it's proposed to do the work. So I mean, as you can see already, the appearance of the site is one of land prone to seasonal or occasional flooding anyway. So the actual final changes which we'll see are not a lot different to what's there at the moment. And that's the view, just looking further north over the reserve area. That's it. So really, the recommendation is one of approval, and the information is all contained in the report. Unless there's anything else I can add, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Members, questions for Peter? Ivor.
Chair, maybe I've taken my eye off the ball in this one, but is there not a land use conflict here, encouraging geese to come into the nature reserve? Is there not a shooting site at the other side for wildfowlers?
You get the same at Calaverick, I think, Ivor.
Thanks, Chair. There was a representation passed on Monday to me by a gentleman who was raising questions about the process we're going through today. He seemed to feel that because there was a triple SI abutting the site, and because on the other side of the bay you have a national nature reserve, it was necessary to go through further consultation. Now, I have spoken with David, and the response, well, David can answer for himself, but my understanding is that the gentleman's points were spurious.
You answer that, David?
I don't think I used the word spurious, but never mind. Basically, this was a late representation which was sent to only a couple of members, so I would suggest that really it's got little of no weight and probably really shouldn't be raised in any depth at the committee meeting. The one thing which was raised, which I think is worthy of consideration, is whether or not environmental impact assessment should have been required. The allegation was that because it was right beside what's called a triple SI, Site of Special Scientific Interest, there automatically should be a requirement for an EIA. Well, I've looked at the Town Country Planning Environment Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations 2011, and it definitely does not fall within Schedule 1. which is the big schemes that automatically require an EIA, such as nuclear power station and the like. And nor can I see any categories which it falls within in Schedule 2, so I'm quite satisfied that an EIA would not have been required in this case.
Thank you. Councillor McKee.
It's just, Chair, the way Peter started off, I thought he'd already bookings for some geese, so we need to rush this through. So if that's the case, I'm quite happy to go with recommendations.
No in session yet, Councillor. Councillor Geddes.
It would be, as the other member who got the correspondence from Mr Barnes, and likewise I did ask for Mr Sutty's comments, it would be helpful, in fact, for chapter and verse to be given to the late representative. So I take it that will be handled administratively, Chair. That is really the question that I would put at this stage to Mr Sutty.
I mean, technically the representation hasn't come to me, it's only come to me through yourselves, but if the committee is happy for me to respond on your behalf, I'm more than happy to do that.
Members, okay. Questions for Peter? Members, we're now in session. Agree the recommendation? That's fine.
Just to confirm, the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Now on to item 10. A part is a change of use of a ground floor shop to form tea room and part of first floor flat to form beauticians, installation of boiler flue and extract grill and external painting of front elevation of the building. And part B, internal alterations to bring about change of use of existing shop and flat to form tea room, beauty room and flat installation of secondary glazing, first and second floors, boiler flue, extract grill and external painting of the front of the elevation of the building. Planning number for A is 14-P-3-0421, B is 14-P-3-0422. Speaking in this will be Andrew Robinson. On you go, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is two applications for planning permission and listed building consent on the same property. Essentially, it's the change of use of the ground floor from a shop to a tea room, part of the first floor flat to a beauticians, and there's various internal and external alterations also proposed. And the property itself is Category B listed, and it's located on the eastern side of Queensbury Street in Dumfries town centre. Shown on the slide, and there's the site at the bottom right in the context of the town centre. In terms of beside the site, there's a car parking area to the south, and it's adjoined with other properties next to it. So this is the front elevation of the property. It still contains a traditional shop front, and it also contains characteristic windows on the first and second floor. And this is the property with the neighbouring properties next to it. This is the gable end of the property, which is taken from the car park area where a proposed flue would be situated in the roof, which I'll show on the slide in a second. In terms of the proposed external works, the works to the front includes repainting the existing painted stonework, so it's just two painted areas already. There's no actual colour proposed, but there is a type of paint proposed. And to the side elevation to the gable is where the boiler flue and extract grill would be installed. To the remainder of the front elevation are general repairs which don't actually require consent. The proposed section shows some of the alterations internally. In particular, there is the installation of secondary glazing to the first and second floor windows and various petitions associated with the use, which is shown in a bit more detail in these floor plans, which are highlighted in colour. So there's the existing and proposed ground floor plan, where a kitchen area and various rooms are to be formed. There'll be some partition walls. On the first floor, mainly to the area where the beauticians will be at the back of the building, there'll be some partition walls to form rooms. This is a close-up of the existing shopfront, where externally it's to remain unchanged other than the already painted areas would be repainted. But the raised area in the shopfront's actually proposed to be removed. That is to create a seating area associated with the tea room use. This is inside the property, and it's actually proposed not to remove those timber window features. This is where the proposed kitchen area would be, where there'll be some partitions formed, and opposite where there's a toilet. So you can see there's no architectural features present in that part of the building. And then going towards the rear, again where some partition walls will be formed, there's no architectural features there. Moving upstairs, that's where the beauticians area will be formed. So that's a partition there that's going to go. As you can see, again, no architectural features will be affected by that. And again, in this kitchen area, with regard to the proposed secondary glazing, effectively it's just going to be a glazing behind the windows. It's required for a building warrant issues for the flats. So that will be the first floor area, and then on the second floor as well. In conclusion, the proposed use and alterations are considered acceptable, would comply with the local development plan, and the applications are both recommended for approval, subject to conditions stated.
Thanks, Andrew. Any members got any questions for Andrew? Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, sir. 2.1, Chair, Council Roads Officer. Unusual phraseology at the back end of that paragraph. This may not warrant ground for objection. You know, does it or does it no warrant ground? I think I'd be happier to see.
Yes, this tends to be fairly standard terminology we get from him. We interpret that as no objection.
Councillor Dick.
Just wondering if it's excuse me. I'm just wondering if it's a partial retrospective planning application, since it seems to be an awful lot of work going on.
Any other members?
It wasn't me. Yeah, it was just actually to do with the painting, and I noticed that it's not an objection, but a question from the Architectural Heritage Society. And I noticed one of the conditions does sort of address the condition on the colour of the paint, but should we be explicit there and just having the type of paint as well? I know it is sort of referenced in the application, and as it would be an additional way maybe to satisfy that query, just the colour, type and extent of painting. If that's maybe just to sort of cross the T's and dot the I's, as it were, but I don't know how the other members feel at the moment. But.
David?
I was just going to say that they have actually said as part of the application, you can see in paragraph 1.3 that it would be keem, however you say it, mineral paint, and they're sort of clearly making reference to it being a mineral paint as opposed to a gloss paint, and we certainly wouldn't to have a gloss paint there. But there's no harm in adding in and type as well. If the members are happier with that, it's not an issue.
Stephen?
And finally, the extent of the painting as well, because I think that was one of the queries raised. So again, I'm not sure how, whether that should or shouldn't be, but it was just really to raise it.
Andrew?
It'll just be to already painted areas. From the front elevation, you can see that there's already a lot of stonework on the building. That wouldn't be. It'll effectively just be the areas around the windows. It's listed on the plan as an elevation. I don't know whether it comes out, so whether you can see it so much, but it basically says on there that it is just to the areas that are already painted, so it's not the stonework.
Councillor McCarthy?
Can you go back to the photograph as you're looking down Queensbury Street? That one. I've intended to keep the old signage there, You know, one time you had Jardin and Company run right down the side of that building, which is quite an attractive feature. Is that intent to be kept, you know, Ivor's Cakes or whatever it's going to be called?
It is intended to be kept. There's no proposal in front of us as yet as to what lettering that may be, but that may require a separate application. Particularly with the height, it would probably need advertisement consent.
Thank you.
Any other members? Got the recommendations? Agreed.
Could I just clarify that's agreed with the addition of and type inserted into condition 1? Thank you. The application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report with the insertion of and type into condition 1. Thank you.
No debating here. As I say, next two items, 11 and 12, are just for information, appeal decisions for information and noting only. Members noting that? Thanks. As I've got... No, Stephen.
Sorry, it was actually just on the very last item where the reporter added a further 9 conditions. And I was just wondering if there was any detail of that readily available. I didn't get a chance to look on the website there. But
DPU Scotland Golf.
Yes, they are all in the actual decision of the reporter. What he's basically done there is add on the conditions which were on the original permission that were still relevant. This is an interesting thing because in the last few months, I think we've across Scotland, we've become a lot more aware of Section 42 applications and the need to actually attach all the conditions that were attached last time round to them again. So that's effectively what we didn't do that first time round with this because we were unaware we had to. But it's all become a lot clearer through case law and getting legal advice on this. So we would have actually attached those conditions ourselves now, but we didn't at the time, and the reporter did it for us.
Right, members, as I say, number 13, any other business deemed urgent by the chairman, as I've got no other urgent business. I would just like to thank Jim for the time he took, the contribution he gave to the planning committee when he was chair. Thank him very much, and for the help he's got.